Chapter 3864. Zhuowen stepped on the burly man's spine and stomped him to the ground. He said coldly, "If you don't do it, you'll die now. If you do it, if you're lucky, you might be able to keep your life." The burly man laid on the ground with humiliation in his eyes. His heart was filled with mixed feelings, but in the end, he agreed to Zhuowen's condition. Swoosh! A ray of light streaked across the horizon and landed in front of the Hong Martial Divine Sect's majestic mountain gate. When the light faded, a burly man appeared in front of the Hong Martial Divine Sect's mountain gate. "Greetings, Elder Jianzhong." The guards at the two sides of the mountain gate immediately cupped their hands and bowed when they saw the burly man. Their eyes were filled with respect. "Where's Elder Sikong?" Elder Jianzhong's eyes flickered as he asked. One of the guards thought for a moment and said, "Elder Sikong should still be in the law enforcement hall. He has already instructed us that if Elder Jianzhong, Elder Puai, and Elder Lu return, we are to look for him in the law enforcement hall." As he spoke, the guard looked behind Elder Jianzhong and asked, "Where's Elder Puai and Elder Lu?" "The two of them are still on Evil King Island, so I came back first," Elder Jianzhong said indifferently. The two guards did not think much of it and allowed Elder Jianzhong to enter the mountain gate. Elder Jianzhong walked up the stairs behind the mountain gate and entered the Hong Martial Divine Sect. The law enforcement hall of the Hong Martial Divine Sect was located on an independent mountain peak. This mountain peak was named the Law Enforcement Peak. The law enforcement hall on top of was extremely vast. From afar, it looked like a huge palace. After Elder Jianzhong arrived at the peak, he entered the law enforcement hall without any obstructions. At this moment, there were 5 people sitting in the law enforcement hall's huge hall. Sitting on the main seat was the Hong Martial Divine Sect's sect master, Shi Shenhong. Sikong Chiyu sat next to Shi Shenhong, while the other 3 people sat on both sides. They were all elders with rather high status in the sect. The 5 of them were discussing something. When Elder Jianzhong entered the hall, the 5 of them stopped talking. Shi Shenhong glanced at Elder Jianzhong and nodded. "Jianzhong, take a seat." Elder Jianzhong didn't say anything and just sat there silently. "Where are Elder Puai and Elder Lu? Why didn't they come with you? Also, didn't I tell you to go to the Evil King Road and wait for that Zhuowen?" When Elder Jianzhong had just sat down, Sikong Chiyu frowned slightly and asked in a deep voice. Elder Jianzhong said awkwardly, "Elder Pu, and Elder Lu are still waiting at Evil King Island. I had something to do at the last minute, so I came back first." Sikong Chiyu's brows furrowed slightly. He was somewhat uncomfortable with Elder Jianzhong disobeying his orders without permission. Just as he was about to berate a few words, Shi Shenhong interjected. "Sikong, you don't have to be so harsh. That Zhuowen is just a nameless pawn. Even an early yin-yang transformation stage elder can capture him. You're sending out 3 at once. You're truly making a big deal out of this. Even if Jianzhong leaves, the remaining Elder Puai and Elder Lu can complete the mission perfectly," Shi Shenhong said indifferently. Sikong Chiyu fell silent. Shi Shenhong already said it to this extent. What else could he say? Furthermore, this Elder Jianzhong was originally a member of Shi Shenhong's faction. If he berated Elder Jianzhong in front of Shi Shenhong, it was clearly not giving Shi Shenhong face. Thinking up to here, Sikong Chiyu endured it and just said indifferently, "Don't do it again." Elder Jianzhong hurriedly cupped his hands towards Sikong Chiyu and said, "Jianzhong understands." After that, Elder Jianzhong cupped his hands towards Shi Shenhong and said, "Sect Master, Jianzhong may be presumptuous to ask, does Hong Shenwu really have the remnant copy of the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra on him?" Mentioning the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra, Shi Shenhong's expression immediately became solemn. At first, I didn't believe it. After all, the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra was destroyed in front of Hongwu Shengzhen's many powerhouses back then. But Hong Shenwu personally displayed overwhelming righteous energy in front of me. Although I didn't cultivate the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra before, I can also recognize the aura of overwhelming righteous energy. What he displayed was indeed genuine, overwhelming righteous energy. Shi Shenhong said solemnly. The moment these words came out, inside the hall, everyone revealed visibly moved expressions. They all knew the value of the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra. This was the #1 exorcism classic. Furthermore, even cultivators without exorcism talent themselves had the possibility of cultivating it too. As long as they cultivated this kind of classic, then they would not need to carry fluorites in the dark and could rely on exorcism power to dispel evil spirits, even refining evil spirits. Since the remnant copy is on him, why doesn't Sect Master kill him and seize his spirit ring? Elder Jian Zhong asked. Shi Shenhong shook his head and said, Jian Zhong, you're thinking too simply. That Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra remnant copy has already been utterly destroyed by him. Right now, that cultivation method is hidden in this old fellow's head. Can't use soul-searching art? Elder Jian Zhong asked with furrowed brows. Shi Shenhong smiled coldly and said, Memories obtained by soul-searching tend to be incomplete. If we soul-search that old fellow, what we obtain is an even more incomplete Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra. How will we still cultivate it? Elder Jian Zhong scratched his head and asked, Then what do we do now? Looking at Hong Shenwu, that old fellow's appearance, I'm afraid that he'd rather die than say the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra. Shi Shenhong smiled coldly and said, This old fellow is indeed stubborn, but he has a fatal weakness. It's shielding his shortcomings. He's very concerned about his 2 precious disciples. We just need to make a move on his 2 disciples. I don't believe that this old fellow won't cooperate. As he said, Shi Shenhong stood up and said to an old man on the left seat, Law enforcement elder, this matter will be left to you. It's best to fish out the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra from that old fellow as soon as possible. Let's go first. Shi Shenhong got up and prepared to leave the hall. Sikong Chiyu and the rest also followed closely behind. Sect Master, I wish to stay behind and interrogate together with Law enforcement elder. I also wish to share Sect Master's burden and quickly interrogate out the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra, Elder Jian Zhong suddenly said. Shi Shenhong nodded his head and said indifferently, Since you wish to stay behind, then stay behind. Hope that you all don't disappoint me. Before long, there was only Elder Jian Zhong and Law enforcement elder left in the hall. Jian Zhong, I didn't expect that you're suddenly so interested in interrogation. I remember that what you were most unwilling to come to in the past was this old man's law enforcement hall. What's with you today? Did you eat the wrong medicine? Law enforcement elder narrowed his eyes, sizing up Elder Jian Zhong. Elder Jian Zhong was slightly nervous but calmed down very quickly and said, Law enforcement elder, I'm naturally not interested in your law enforcement hall. But I'm interested in Hong Shenwu, this old fellow. Furthermore, you also know that if I can help interrogate out the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra, Sect Master will regard me even more highly too. Chapter 3865. Clang. Patriarch of Law Enforcement came to the deep part of the main hall. He pressed his right palm on the wall on the left, and the place where his palm was pressed slowly caved in. Immediately after, a strange thumping sound came from below the wall. It was as if someone was walking quickly from below. It sounded particularly horrifying. Elder Jian Zhong was surprised to see that below the wall, the ground about 4 square meters had caved in and separated from the middle, revealing a pitch-black tunnel. The dungeon of the law enforcement hall is really secretive. The entrance is hidden here. No one would have thought of it. Elder Jian Zhong murmured to himself. Patriarch of Law Enforcement said proudly, Of course, this tunnel was designed by me. There are 81 mechanisms hidden in the tunnel, and each mechanism is different. Even if an expert at the peak of the Yin-Yang realm accidentally activates the mechanism, he will die. Elder Jian Zhong frowned slightly, as if he was lost in thought. Patriarch of Law Enforcement didn't notice Elder Jian Zhong's strange look and continued, Jian Zhong, follow me. The mechanism in this tunnel is horrible. If there is no guide, the mechanism will be activated, and it will be terrible. Patriarch of Law Enforcement reminded Elder Jian Zhong several times, and then they entered the tunnel. Elder Jian Zhong followed closely behind Patriarch of Law Enforcement, imitating his steps. The tunnel was quite spacious. 4 or 5 people standing side by side in the tunnel would not feel crowded. On both sides of the tunnel, there were bright lights, and the whole tunnel was as bright as day. After a while, they walked out of the tunnel and came to a bronze gate that was 10 meters high. The surface of the bronze gate was covered with dense chains, which tightly bound the whole gate. Elder Jian Zhong noticed that there was a palm-shaped dent in the center of the bronze gate. Patriarch of Law Enforcement stretched out his right hand and put it on the dent. His palm fit perfectly with the dent. Crack, crack, crack. Inside the bronze gate, there was the sound of heavy chains sliding. Many chains on the surface of the gate seemed to be alive, moving to both sides and finally hiding in the darkness. After the chains disappeared, the bronze gate was freed and slowly opened to both sides. Behind the gate, there was a bluestone avenue that was wider than the tunnel. On both sides of the bluestone avenue, there were neatly arranged cages with iron fences. There were more or less prisoners in these cages. Elder Jian Zhong could see that after the bronze door opened, these prisoners did not even lift their eyelids. They were probably numb from being locked up for too long. Elder of Law Enforcement brought Elder Jian Zhong along the bluestone path and walked towards the depths. After about a quarter of an hour, the two of them arrived at the end of the bluestone path. There was a huge empty space there, and above the empty space, there was a huge iron cage floating in the air. Upon closer inspection, the top of the iron cage was suspended in midair by a thick and pitch-black chain. There were 3 people locked up in the iron cage. The law enforcement patriarch waved his right hand. With a creaking sound, the black chains that were tied to the iron cage slowly sank down. Clang! The iron cage fell to the ground, and the 3 people in the cage were shocked. Elder Jian Zhong's gaze landed on the 3 people in the cage. He immediately recognized them. They were the slovenly Taoist, Dao Kong, and Dokio. The slovenly Taoist's hands and feet were bound by golden energy, and he could only lie in the cage miserably. Dao Kong was kneeling on the ground with a silly smile, and saliva was dripping from the corner of his mouth. Dokio hugged his knees helplessly, and his head was on his chest. His entire body was trembling. The law enforcement patriarch opened the side door of the cage and pulled the smiling Dao Kong out. Pain. Dao Kong was in pain, but the silly smile on his face did not stop. What do you want? The slovenly Taoist's expression changed slightly. He struggled to crawl over and shouted at the law enforcement patriarch. The law enforcement patriarch sneered. He looked down at the slovenly Taoist and said, Hong Shinwu, my patience is limited. Now, hurry up and tell me the cultivation method of Heaven and Earth Howard Sutra. If not, I'll kill your silly disciple. The slovenly Taoist was so angry that his entire body was trembling. He roared, Why? You've already searched his soul, and Dao Kong is already delirious. Why can't you let him go? The law enforcement patriarch shook his head and said coldly, Hong Shinwu, look at the situation now. Don't you understand the situation? Remnants of the Hong sect should not be allowed to exist in this world. Furthermore, you remnants of the Hong sect dared to kill our Hong martial divine sect's elders, so all of you deserve to die. Now, as long as you tell us the Heaven and Earth Howard Sutra, we might give you a quick death and not continue to torture you. The slovenly Taoist calmed down and said softly, Let my 2 disciples go, and I'll give you the cultivation method of the Heaven and Earth Howard Sutra. The law enforcement patriarch's lips curled into a mocking smile. Let go of these 2 remnants who might become trouble for our Hong martial divine sect in the future. Hong Shenwu, you must be joking. Right now, you don't have any choice. If you're smart enough to tell us the truth, I'll let your 2 adorable disciples suffer less. Or else. As he said that, the law enforcement patriarch's eyes flashed coldly. Fine lightning bolts appeared in his palm as he squeezed Dao Kong's neck. Pain. Dao Kong struggled with all his might. His eyes were almost white, and he was foaming at the mouth. His voice was shrill. "No, let him go. I'll tell you." The slovenly Taoist lowered his head in pain. He finally gave in, not because of himself, but because of his disciples. Dao Kong, Dao Jing, and the others had very tragic backgrounds to begin with. They were abandoned children who were left to fend for themselves in a barren land. It was the slovenly Taoist who had picked them up and raised them. The slovenly Taoist had already treated Dao Kong and Dokyo as his own son. How could he bear to see Dao Kong being tortured like this? The law enforcement patriarch's lips curled into a victorious smile as he threw Dao Kong onto the ground. Dao Kong was still twitching on the ground. Fresh blood flowed out of his 7 orifices. "Save Dao Kong. He's dying." When the slovenly Taoist priest saw Dao Kong's appearance, his expression changed drastically, and he roared. The law enforcement patriarch was unmoved as he said indifferently, "Since you want to save your disciples, why aren't you writing the Heaven and Earth Howard Sutra?" Suddenly, the law enforcement patriarch noticed that Elder Jianzhong, who had been standing beside him, suddenly walked to Dao Kong's side and carried him up. Chapter 3866. Elder Jianzhong, do you know what you're doing? Elder of law enforcement's face darkened. He looked at Elder Jianzhong coldly and suppressed his anger. Elder Jianzhong gently put Dao Kong beside the slovenly Taoist. Then he turned to Elder of law enforcement and said with a wry smile, "Elder of law enforcement, I'm sorry this time." Elder of law enforcement was confused and asked subconsciously, "What do you mean?" As soon as Patriarch of law enforcement finished his words, a strong sense of crisis swept over him. He only felt a gust of cold air flowing from his tailbone to the depths of his mind. Feeling this strong sense of danger, Elder of law enforcement retreated decisively. When Elder of law enforcement retreated, a vortex appeared in the space beside Elder Jianzhong. Then a fierce purple-gold sword rushed out and attacked Elder of law enforcement. Bang! 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 The purple-gold sword slashed 3 times in front of Elder of law enforcement. Each slash carried a terrifying sword chi. The surrounding ground and walls all burst open. The clanging sound of swords hitting each other could be heard in the air. Bang! After the last explosion, Elder of law enforcement managed to stop himself. He felt a sweet taste and spat out a mouthful of blood. "Who are you?" Elder of law enforcement looked up and was shocked to see a young man in black standing beside Elder Jianzhong. Just now, this man suddenly appeared from the void and slashed out a purple-gold sword. The purple-gold sword was very strange. When it fell on him, it cut into his spirit. The terrifying sword essence seemed to be able to cut his spirit at any time. Now, there was still a terrifying sword essence left in his spirit. If he had not resisted it with all his might, he would have been killed. The middle stage of yin-yang change? You actually blocked my sword essence of spirit. The young man in black's eyes were cold and full of undisguised killing intent. His voice was as cold as a knife. Then he stepped forward and walked toward Elder of law enforcement. "Who are you?" Elder of law enforcement's eyes were full of fear, and he could not help retreating. He was too afraid of the purple-gold sword. If he had not reacted in time, he would have been a dead man. Zhuowen, the black-clothed young man, softly spat out these 2 words. However, it caused the pupils of the law enforcement elder to shrink until they turned into needles. "You? It's actually you," Elder of law enforcement screamed. He then looked at Elder Jianzhong and said angrily, "Elder Jianzhong, you traitor. You actually brought a wanted criminal into the law enforcement hall's dungeon. You are playing with fire." Inside the iron cage, Elder Jianzhong smiled bitterly. What could he do? At that time, he only had this one choice. If he didn't agree to Zhuowen's conditions, he would already be a dead man. So long-winded. You should just go to hell. Zhuowen noticed that the law enforcement patriarch was about to send a message. He stepped out with his right foot and turned into an illusory purple shadow, appearing beside the law enforcement patriarch in an instant. He took out a purple gold sword from between his eyebrows with his right hand and slashed it down, cutting off Patriarch of Law Enforcement's right hand that was about to send a message. The law enforcement elder screamed miserably. He was terrified. He didn't expect Zhuowen to be so strong. Die! Zhuowen didn't give the law enforcement elder any chance. He took out another spiritual soul sword essence. 2 spiritual soul sword essences, one from the front and one from the back, surrounded the law enforcement elder and completely pierced through him. With a plop, the law enforcement elder fell to the ground with blood all over his body. He didn't move an inch. Elder Jianzhong looked at the law enforcement elder on the ground, and his legs couldn't help but tremble. He looked at Zhuowen with fear and respect. The law enforcement elder was a middle-stage yin-yang transformation expert after all. Yet, he was easily dealt with by Zhuowen. Elder Jianzhong was really starting to doubt whether Zhuowen was really a nihility god transformation stage cultivator. Was he pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? After the law enforcement elder was defeated by Zhuowen, many of the prisoners in the surrounding cages were alarmed. They all looked at the law enforcement elder who had fallen to the ground and were all shocked. They didn't expect that there would be someone who dared to cause trouble in the prison of the law enforcement hall of the Hong Martial Divine Sect. Moreover, he killed the law enforcement elder. This was too cruel. They looked at Zhuowen's back, and their eyes were filled with hope. They all hoped that Zhuowen would be able to save them. Unfortunately, they were disappointed to find that Zhuowen did not even look at them. Instead, he walked straight to the iron cage in the deepest part of the cave. No one dared to make a sound. This was a ruthless person who dared to kill the law enforcement elder. They didn't dare to say anything. If they were killed, it would be too late to cry. Senior Brother Daowen, when Dokyo heard the commotion, he raised his head. His eyes were red and tears flowed down his cheeks. He threw himself into Zhuowen's arms. Zhuowen gently picked up Dao Jing and looked at the little Taoist boy who was crying in his arms. A sense of guilt rose in his heart. Senior Brother Daowen. Dao Kong had already woken up. He tilted his head and looked at Zhuowen. He repeated Dokyo's words. Then, he laughed foolishly and clapped his hands. Senior Brother Daowen, Dao Kong. He doesn't recognize me and my master. Dokyo sobbed. At this moment, the shackles on the slovenly Taoist had been released by Elder Jianzhong. He stood up and looked at Zhuowen with a complicated gaze. Finally, he bowed deeply to Zhuowen and said, Daowen, thank you for risking your life to save the 3 of us. The slovenly Taoist knew that Zhuowen didn't have to care about them. After all, the Hong Martial Divine Sect was too dangerous. With Zhuowen's strength, it was too risky to save them. The sloppy Taoist didn't even hope that Zhuowen would come back to save them. As long as Zhuowen could escape from the Hong Martial God Sect's bounty and take revenge for them in the future, he would be satisfied. However, Zhuowen didn't. Instead, he risked his life to save them. At this moment, the slovenly Taoist view of Zhuowen had changed. I'm also a member of the Hong sect. I can't just ignore you guys, Zhuowen said seriously. Good. The slovenly Taoist smiled. Sect leader, we can't stay here any longer. Let's leave first, Zhuowen said solemnly. The slovenly Taoist nodded. Under Zhuowen's signal, they entered Zhuowen's great world. Elder Jianzhong, bring us out of the Hong Martial Divine Sect. After this, I will return the soul imprint to you, and you will regain your freedom, Zhuowen said to Elder Jianzhong. Elder Jianzhong revealed a bitter smile. He knew that he was already on the same boat as Zhuowen. It was impossible for him not to help Zhuowen. Don't worry. Now that our fates are connected, I will definitely bring you out. Elder Jianzhong sighed. Zhuowen nodded. He waved his sleeve and entered the great world. Chapter 3867. In the deep passageway, Elder Jianzhong followed the memory in his mind and slowly walked towards the top of the passageway. When Elder Jianzhong's feet landed at the entrance of the passageway, he let out a long sigh of relief. He had finally left the dungeon. Next, he only needed to leave the Hong Wu Divine Sect, and he would be completely safe. He silently closed the entrance of the passageway and walked out of the main hall. However, when he reached the entrance of the main hall, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. His body trembled, and his eyes widened as he stared at the square in front of the main hall. A figure was slowly walking over. This figure clearly saw Elder Jianzhong, and with steady footsteps, he arrived at the entrance of the main hall. Sect leader. Elder Jianzhong secretly broke out in cold sweat, but he forced himself to calm down. He respectfully bowed to this figure and said, "Thank you." The figure that suddenly appeared in the square in front of the main hall was the sect leader of the Hongwu Divine Sect, Shi Shenhong. "Jianzhong, where's the enforcement elder? I'm looking for him," Shi Shenhong casually said. Elder Jianzhong's face revealed a trace of hesitation as he said, "The enforcement elder is currently in the dungeon interrogating the remaining members of the Hong sect. I wonder why sect leader is looking for him?" Shi Shenhong did not seem to notice the strange expression on Elder Jianzhong's face as he said seriously, "Doesn't Hong Shenwu have 2 disciples? One of them is already stupid and has no value. I plan to take the other one away. These 2 disciples of Hong Shenwu have cultivated a portion of the heaven and earth Howard scripture. If I search their souls, I might be able to piece together a portion of the heaven and earth Howard scripture's cultivation method." At this point, Shi Shenhong suspiciously said, "However, I sent a message to the enforcement elder, but he didn't reply to me. That's why I personally came to the enforcement hall to find him." "Jianzhong, why didn't you enter the dungeon with the enforcement elder?" Elder Jianzhong was perturbed as he revealed a helpless smile. "The enforcement elder thinks that I don't know how to interrogate and that entering the dungeon would only be a hindrance. That's why he didn't let me in and went in alone to interrogate." Shi Shenhong shook his head and said, "The enforcement elder's temperament really hasn't changed after all these years. Since he didn't reply to my message, I'm afraid he's at a crucial point in the interrogation. Otherwise, he would have replied to me. I'll go in and look for him now. Jianzhong, do you want to come with me?" Shi Shenhong invited Elder Jianzhong. Elder Jianzhong shook his head and said, "Forget it. Since disciplinary elder doesn't want me to enter the dungeon, there is no need for me to force my way in. In that case, you can go back first." Shi Shenhong nodded. After Elder Jianzhong left, Shi Shenhong's eyelids twitched. For some reason, he felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what it was. Maybe he's a little crazy. Shi Shenhong shook his head and stepped into the main hall. He easily found the entrance to the dungeon and opened it. Shi Shenhong was, after all, the head of the sect. He had the authority to enter all the tunnels of the Hongwu God sect. Shi Shenhong walked with mysterious steps, smoothly passing through the passageway, full of traps, arriving at the bronze door at the end of the passageway. At this moment, the bronze door was wide open. Shi Shenhong was not surprised. The bronze door was the entrance to the dungeon. Since the law enforcement elder had come in first, it was impossible for the door to be closed. The moment Shi Shenhong passed through the bronze door, he immediately felt that something was wrong. This was because he discovered that there were many places in the cage behind the bronze gate that had caved in. Furthermore, he could feel intense energy ripple from these places. It was obvious that an intense battle had just taken place here. Shi Shenhong's expression changed slightly. He followed the green stone path and quickly entered the depths of the dungeon. Not far from the deepest part, he saw the corpse of the law enforcement elder lying on the ground. He briefly checked and knew that the law enforcement elder was dead. He also noticed that in the deepest part of the green stone path, there was an iron cage that had been placed down. However, there wasn't a single person in the iron cage. Hong Shenwu and the other 2 who were originally locked up in the iron cage had disappeared without a trace. "Who is it? How dare you make a move in my Hongwu God Sect's dungeon? You're simply courting death." Shi Shenhong roared angrily. He came to the door of a cage and tore it open. He grabbed the prisoner inside the cage and held it in his hand. "Speak. What the hell is going on here? If you don't speak, you'll die immediately." Shi Shenhong roared. The prisoner trembled in fear. He naturally recognized Shi Shenhong's identity and knew that he was the #1 expert of the Hongwu God sect. How could he dare to disobey the orders of such an expert? Trembling, he recounted everything that had happened in the dungeon. "What? It's actually Jianzhong. Sure, Shan Hong revealed a look of disbelief. He once again recalled the unnatural expression on Elder Jianzhong's face when he met him. He immediately realized that this person might be right. Sure, Shan Hong casually threw the prisoner on the ground and rushed towards the entrance of the dungeon. At the same time, he issued an emergency signal to the upper echelons of the sect, ordering them to be on alert. After Shan Hong entered the dungeon, Elder Jianzhong knew that the matter would soon be exposed. Therefore, he hurriedly left this place and rushed towards the Hongwu God sect's mountain gate. As long as he left the Hongwu God sect, he could immediately use the divine ship to escape. At that time, he would have a chance to escape. Jianzhong, you're in such a hurry. Are you planning to leave the sect? When Jianzhong arrived at the stone steps in front of the mountain gate, a middle-aged man happened to be returning from outside the mountain gate. When he saw Jianzhong, he immediately went up to greet him. This middle-aged man was also an elder of the Hongwu God sect. His cultivation was similar to Jianzhong's at the early stage of the yin-yang change realm. He had a good relationship with Jianzhong. At this moment, Jianzhong did not have the time to chat with this person. He casually brushed him off and hurriedly walked past him. Jianzhong, why are you in such a hurry? Did something happen? The middle-aged man noticed that Elder Jianzhong's expression was strange. He chased after him and asked with concern, I'm fine. I just wanted to go out and relax. Jianzhong said absent-mindedly. The middle-aged man felt that Jianzhong was a little strange. However, he did not think too much about it. Coincidentally, the communication jade talisman at his waist lit up. He stopped in his tracks and checked the communication jade talisman with his spiritual will. His body shook, and he immediately drew his divine sword and slashed at Jianzhong. Gotcha! However, when the divine sword was about to reach Jianzhong's back, a purplish gold sword suddenly appeared behind Elder Jianzhong and cut the divine sword in half. The purplish gold sword did not lose its momentum and continued to slash at the middle-aged man. Chapter 3868. What are you waiting for? Let's go. Zhuowen's voice could be heard. Then, Zhuowen dashed out of the great world, grabbed the middle-aged man, and dashed towards the mountain gate. Although he was in the great world, his spiritual will had been observing the outside world. When he saw the middle-aged man immediately attack Elder Jianzhong after checking the communication jade amulet, he knew that they had been exposed. At the same time, his spiritual will sensed a terrifying aura within the Hongwu divine sect. These auras were heading towards the mountain gate. It seemed like the experts of the Hongwu divine sect were all alerted. Bang! Just as Zhuowen was about to leave the Hong sect, a strong ripple spread out from the Hongwu divine sect. Then, like a huge light shield, it covered the entire mountain range of the Hongwu divine sect. Zhuowen, on the other hand, crashed into the energy ripple that was like a protective barrier. His body was pushed back by the recoil. His feet stomped fiercely in the air as he involuntarily retreated dozens of steps. Every step he took created a terrifying shockwave that formed a boiling pillar of air under his feet. The two guards at the mountain gate stood behind the mountain gate in shock and anger. They didn't dare to fight with Zhuowen. They had seen with their own eyes how Zhuowen killed an elder in the early stage of the yin-yang transformation stage with a single slash. Wouldn't they be courting death if they went up? Furthermore, they recognized Zhuowen's identity. It was Zhuowen who was wanted by the Hongwu divine sect. This is the sect protection array. It seems like the sect master has found out that the enforcement elder has been killed and has issued the highest level of martial law in the sect. Even the sect protection array has been activated. Elder Jianzhong's face was as pale as a sheet. His body trembled as he continued. This is a heaven-breaking level 7 array. It's extremely powerful and terrifying. Zhuowen's face changed slightly. A heaven-breaking tier 7 formation was indeed a little scary. With his current strength, there was no way he could break through such a formation. Zhuowen, how dare you barge into the Hongwu divine sect to kill someone? He's simply courting death. Elder Jianzhong, You're truly audacious. How dare you help a wanted criminal kill a fellow disciple? You traitor, you must die. Countless figures dashed out from the depths of the Hong martial divine sect. They were like a group of demons dancing in a frenzy, densely packed and numerous. Leading the group were more than 10 elders of the Hong Wu divine sect. They were the upper echelons of the sect and were at least in the middle stage of the yin-yang transformation stage. Some of them were even at the pinnacle of the yin-yang transformation stage. What surprised Zhuan was that he didn't see Sikong Chiyu among these people. Elder Jianzhong's face turned pale as he knelt on the ground. He muttered to himself, "It's over. We're all dead. There's no way we can escape." Zhuan's gaze was serious. He did not care about Elder Jianzhong, who had lost his will to fight. Instead, he hovered in the air and looked at the dozens of figures in front of him, landing not far away from him. "Zhuan, surrender now." The person leading the group was an old man with white hair and beard. His aura was the strongest among these people, and he should be at the pinnacle of the yin-yang transformation stage. According to Zhuan's current strength, he might not be this old man's opponent. Zhuan knew that he couldn't delay any longer. If Shenhong came out, he wouldn't even have the chance to escape. Therefore, the moment these people appeared in front of him, Zhuan decisively took out the three-fire true mirror. Zhuan's right hand gripped the copper mirror fragment tightly. Vast grand mist god force poured out from his body and entered the three-fire true mirror. Instantly, the three-fire true mirror emitted a terrifying pressure. Strange blood-red flames burst out from the copper mirror and gathered in the air. In a short while, the entire sky above the Hong martial divine sect was filled with a sea of blood-red flames. It was a strange and terrifying scene. The instant the blood-red flames filled the sky above the Hong martial divine sect, an extremely terrifying pressure fell on the entire Hong martial divine sect, as if gravity had multiplied by countless times. Many of the cultivators who were originally floating in the air immediately staggered and fell to the ground, causing many cracks to appear on the ground. Only the dozen or so yin-yang transformation stage cultivators were barely able to maintain their hovering position in the air. However, from their slightly trembling bodies, it could be seen that they were having a difficult time resisting the terrifying, oppressive might. This is the three-fire true mirror that was auctioned off by the World Auction House. It's actually on this kid. The old man leading the group looked at this scene in shock. His body trembled, and his heart was filled with fear. This was a grade 4 astral weapon fragment. Its strength was comparable to a God Domain transformation stage expert strength. Even if Zhuan's cultivation wasn't enough, and he couldn't display the full strength of a grade 4 astral weapon fragment, it was still terrifying. They might not be able to block it easily. Pucci! Zhuan spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was extremely pale, but he still gritted his teeth and continued to channel energy into the three-fire true mirror. On the other side, he was frantically absorbing the chaos crystals in the outside world to replenish the large amount of energy in his body. However, it didn't help. The energy he absorbed was much slower than the energy he released. This caused Zhuan to become weaker. Blood-fire mountain collapse. Zhuan's gaze turned cold as he summoned the three-fire true mirror in his hand. Instantly, boundless blood-red flames swept over, forming an incomparably huge mountain. The surface of this mountain was burning with blood-red flames. It fell fiercely and covered the dozen or so upper echelons of the Hong martial divine sect. The eyes of the peak yin-yang transformation stage old man narrowed. He gathered all the energy in his body and barely resisted the terrifying pressure of the mountain. He flew back with difficulty, trying to escape the range of the blood mountain. Unfortunately, as soon as he left the range of the blood mountain, a purplish-gold sword slashed at him from the strange void and slashed his back. The old man spat out a mouthful of blood and fell forward pathetically, falling into the range of the blood mountain. Zhuan, He naturally knew that the one who attacked was Zhuan. He almost cursed out loud. Unfortunately, he didn't manage to curse out loud as the blood mountain covered his entire body. Boom, boom, boom. The blood mountain smashed into the ground. Instantly, terrifying blood-red flames swept out in all directions. 2/5 of the territory of the Hong martial divine sect was engulfed in a horrifying blood flame. Mountains and palaces were all destroyed. Not even ruins were left behind. The blood-red flames were too terrifying. They started to condense together, forming a blood pillar that pierced through the entire Hong martial divine sect and into the sky. Boom, boom, boom. The Hong martial divine sect protection array shone with a blazing light and blocked the blood pillar. However, it didn't last long. The sect protection array crumbled inch by inch, turning into dust. Chapter 3869. The moment Shi Shenhong flew out of the enforcement hall, he could feel the terrifying pressure released by the three-fire true mirror. Following which, his eyes turned red as he saw an incomparably huge blood mountain crashing down from the sky above the mountain gate. With a loud bang, the blood mountain landed within the sect, following which a flood of blood flames swept out like a ferocious beast, engulfing 2/5 of the sect. This blood flame was simply too terrifying. Everywhere it passed, everything was incinerated. Not even a blade of grass was left behind. As for the sect protecting array around the Hong martial divine sect, it started to crumble and disappear under this attack. What made Shi Shenhong even more devastated was that the 10 upper echelons of his Hong Wu divine sect were completely annihilated by this attack. These upper echelons were the backbone of the Hong Wu divine sect. Even the weakest amongst them was in the yin-yang transformation. Now that all of them were dead, the impact on the Hong Wu divine sect was simply too great. Zhuowen, I want you dead. I want you dead. I want you dead. Shi Shenhong let out a beast-like roar. His voice was so loud that it shook the entire Hong martial divine sect. It reverberated throughout the heavens and earth. A terrifying aura burst out from Shi Shenhong's body. His figure was like lightning as he charged out. He stopped above the blood flames and looked at the boundless blood flames. Then, he looked at Zhuowen, who had almost turned into a black dot and disappeared. He hesitated for a while, but in the end, he didn't chase after him. Instead, he used all his strength to extinguish the blood flames below him. This blood flame was emitted by the grade 4 astral weapon, 3 fire true mirror. It had the characteristic of being indestructible. If this blood flame was allowed to continue wreaking havoc in the Hong Wu divine sect, it wouldn't be long before it spread to the entire Hong Wu divine sect. At that time, the Hong Wu divine sect would really be annihilated. At the same time that Shi Shenhong was extinguishing the blood flames, an equally powerful figure flew over from the depths of the mountain range, not far from the sect. This figure was the Hong Wu divine sect's number 2 expert, Sikong Chiyu. This is the blood flames of the 3 fire true mirror? Sect leader, what exactly happened? I just went out for a while. Why did such a thing happen inside the sect? Sikong Chiyu said with immense shock. Shi Shenhong forcefully suppressed his rage and said to Sikong Chiyu, Sikong, all of this was done by that Zhuowen. Immediately chase after that Zhuowen. He had to bring him back. Otherwise, don't come back. Sikong Chiyu's pupils shrunk. She only felt that it was inconceivable. Zhuowen was only at the nihility god transformation stage. How did he obtain the 3 fire true mirror? Furthermore, with Zhuowen's cultivation, he simply did not have the ability to activate the power of a rank 4 astral soldier like the 3 fire true mirror. However, that fella had done such a thing and even destroyed 2/5 of the Hong martial divine sect. Sikong, what are you waiting for? Why aren't you chasing after that Zhuowen? Shi Shenhong's gaze darkened as he looked at Sikong Chiyu. His tone became extremely unfriendly. Sikong Chiyu frowned slightly. Although she was very unhappy with Shi Shenhong's attitude, the latter was still the sect leader of the Hong martial divine sect. She naturally could not disobey Shi Shenhong's orders. Since this kid can use the 3-fire true mirror, although his strength is nothing much, the 3-fire true mirror is too terrifying. Even I might not be able to block the attack of the 3-fire true mirror. Sikong Chiyu said worriedly. Don't worry. This kid's cultivation is too low. He must have paid a huge price to use the 3-fire true mirror. Furthermore, you only need to block them for a while. Shi Shunhong said coldly. Sikong Chiyu did not say anything else. She only nodded and flew towards the distant horizon. Shi Shunhong coldly looked at Sikong Chiyu's departing figure, then silently began to extinguish the blood flames in the surroundings. Although the blood flames covered a large area, Shi Shunhong's cultivation was extraordinary. He was even stronger than Sikong Chiyu, a mid-stage god domain transformation expert. Therefore, he did not need to use too much divine power to extinguish the blood flames. After Shi Shunhong extinguished the blood flames, he instructed a few elders to reorganize the sect. Then, with endless killing intent, he flew towards the distant horizon. This time, their Hong martial divine sect had suffered heavy losses. If he did not kill Zhuowen, Shi Shunhong would not be worthy of being the sect leader of the Hong martial divine sect. Whoosh! In a vast horizon, a stream of light rapidly swept past. It was a huge divine ship. At this moment, on the deck of the divine ship, Zhuowen stood silently at the forefront. His eyes were solemn as he controlled the ship to move forward. In his hand was a bottle of medicine. Divine pills were poured into his mouth, turning into surging medicinal energy that spread throughout his body, healing his injuries. With a wave of his sleeve, he grabbed Elder Jianzhong. At this moment, Elder Jianzhong's body was still trembling. His eyes were filled with the emotions of being reborn. Jianzhong, I'll return this spiritual imprint to you. Now that you're free, you can leave. Zhuowen said calmly as he took out Elder Jianzhong's spiritual imprint from his spiritual imprint and inserted it into the latter's spiritual imprint. Elder Jianzhong looked at Zhuowen with a complicated gaze. He did not expect Zhuowen to have such a powerful trump card. In one move, he killed more than 10 elders of the Hong martial divine sect and destroyed 2/5 of the sect. He began to doubt if this guy was really a void god transformation realm cultivator. Otherwise, how could he have such powerful means? Still not leaving? You won't be able to leave later. Zhuowen coldly glanced at the slightly absent-minded Elder Jianzhong and said expressionlessly. Elder Jianzhong came back to his senses and cupped his fists at Zhuowen seriously. Then, he left his divine ship and fled in another direction. He decided to leave the central region. From now on, he would never take half a step into the central region. Not long after Elder Jianzhong left, Zhuowen's expression changed slightly. A faintly discernible sense of danger began to surface in his mind. He released a powerful spiritual force and started to scan behind him. Then, his face turned gloomy. Hundreds of thousands of miles behind him, he discovered a figure rushing towards him. Moreover, this figure was getting faster and faster. The distance between them was rapidly shortening. In Zhuowen's spiritual force, he recognized the identity of this figure. It was Sikong Chiyu. In a short while, the wind and clouds above Zhuowen changed. An incomparably huge hand came crashing down on the divine ship. Zhuowen's reaction was extremely fast. The moment the hand came crashing down, he left the divine ship and retreated thousands of meters away. He watched as the divine ship was crushed by the huge hand. Chapter 3870. Zhuowen's gaze looked at Sikong Chiyu vigilantly. Just now, he used the 3-fire true mirror. Currently, his essence energy could be said to be greatly depleted. He could at most use the 3-fire true mirror one more time now. But this thing must catch Sikong Chiyu off guard before he could hit her. And it was impossible for Sikong Chiyu to stand in place foolishly and be beaten by him. Therefore, the current situation was very disadvantageous to him. Sikong Chiyu, do you still remember what you said to Miss Luo back then? Zhuowen was silent for a moment and suddenly opened his mouth. Sikong Chiyu was taken aback and looked at Zhuowen rather surprisedly and said with a cold smile, "What do you mean by this? Isn't my meaning clear enough? You and I joining hands have the possibility of killing Shi Shunhong. Isn't your goal to kill Shi Shunhong?" Zhuowen said coolly. Sikong Chiyu's brows furrowed slightly. The killing intent in his eyes became stronger and stronger, staring fixedly at Zhuowen. But Zhuowen turned a deaf ear to Sikong Chiyu's killing intent. Instead, he looked at Sikong Chiyu silently. He knew that Sikong Chiyu was conflicted and hesitant right now. Otherwise, Sikong Chiyu would have long made a move to take action against him. Zhuowen was not in a hurry. He looked at Sikong Chiyu and waited silently, waiting for Sikong Chiyu's final answer. Shi Shunhong carried a bellyful of rage and unleashed his movement technique with all his might, rushing forward explosively. It was only to see places that he passed through, horrifying energy ripples spread out. The surrounding space was affected until it trembled violently, as if it would collapse at any time. Shi Shunhong virtually lost his reason, the fury in his chest continuously accumulating, wanting to completely vent it out at any time. Bang! 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 Only to see Shi Shunhong's figure sweep past a massive lake. Immediately, horrifying high waves surged on the lake surface. The instant the high waves fell to the ground, the entire lake was collapsing. An unprecedentedly terrifying hole appeared. Furthermore, this hole was bottomless, akin to an abyss. It was pitch black, looking exceptionally terrifying and strange, while the lake water also poured into the abyss one after another. The naked eye could not see in the end where this lake water reached the abyss at all. Amen? Shi Shunhong seemed to have sensed something. The communication jade talisman at his waist lit up with a rather bright light. He slowed down a little and used his divine sense to check the message in the communication jade charm. After he finished reading, his face was filled with ecstasy. He sped up and mumbled to himself, "Zhuowen, you're dead meat. You're really dead. If I don't kill you today, I won't be the sect head of the Hong Martial Divine Sect, Shi Shunhong." Before long, Shi Shunhong arrived at a valley. This was precisely the place that Sikong Chiyu mentioned in the message she gave him. At that moment, on the empty ground in the middle of the valley, Sikong Chiyu was standing. Beside her feet was a figure that was in a sorry state. This figure was bound by a powerful force and could not move at all. It could only struggle. When Shi Shunhong saw this figure, he immediately recognized that it was Zhuowen. However, just as Shi Shunhong was about to take a step forward, he thought of something and suddenly stopped. He looked suspiciously at Sikong Chiyu and said, "Sikong, if I'm not mistaken, this kid has the 3 Fire True Mirror on him. That's a rank 4 astral weapon, yet it was actually captured by you so easily?" Sikong Chiyu smiled slightly and said, "Sect Master, this boy's cultivation is too low after all. He's only at the Void God transformation stage." He forcefully used a rank 4 astral weapon. Although he displayed great power, his foundation was injured because of this. He's already an arrow at the end of its flight. How can he be my opponent? Hearing this, Shi Shunhong nodded in agreement. There was no loophole in Sikong Chiyu's statement. After he chased out, he also guessed so. However, Shi Shunhong still did not approach Sikong Chiyu. Instead, he spread out his right hand and said coldly, "Now, hand this person over to me." Although Sikong Chiyu was the second in command of the Hong Martial Divine Sect, Shi Shunhong had never trusted the former. Sikong Chiyu chuckled. She did not feel strange because of Shi Shunhong's lack of trust. Instead, she obediently lifted Zhuowen and threw him to Shi Shunhong. When Zhuowen was thrown over, Shi Shunhong let out a sigh of relief and relaxed his vigilance. The killing intent and fury in his eyes were incomparably cold as they shot out. This boy actually dared to break into the law enforcement hall's dungeon, kill more than a dozen of his Hong Martial Divine Sect's higher-ups, and destroy a large portion of his sect's territory. This was simply an unforgivable crime. He must kill this boy. However, the instant Zhuowen's figure approached, a strong sense of danger arose in Shi Shunhong's heart. Then he felt a terrifying pressure enveloping his body, causing all the hair on his body to stand on end. Moreover, a large amount of sweat flowed out and rustled down. Divine realm. Sure, Shen Hong immediately reacted. He knew that this was the power of the divine realm. Rumble. At the same time, a terrifying fist light blasted out from behind him, ruthlessly smashing towards the back of his head. Sure, Shen Hong could not be bothered with Zhuowen in front of him. He subconsciously thought that this Zhuowen was completely restrained and could not pose any threat to him. He suddenly turned around and punched behind him. Two fists collided. Instantly, terrifying ripples rose in the surroundings. Moreover, a series of firecracker-like explosions resounded. Then, Shi Shenhong saw Sikong Chiyu's expressionless face. Sikong Chiyu, you have big guts, actually daring to make a move against me. Are you trying to rebel? Shi Shenhong was both shocked and furious. He really did not expect Sikong Chiyu to actually make a move, so he was not on guard. This was a hasty counterattack. However, Shi Shenhong was worthy of being a middle-stage divine realm transformation expert. He was even a minor realm higher than Sikong Chiyu. Even if he made a hasty counterattack, he still did not fall into a disadvantageous position and was evenly matched with Sikong Chiyu. But Shi Shenhong soon discovered a trace of a mocking smile at the corners of Sikong Chiyu's mouth. He was first stunned, then immediately felt a swift and fierce sword intent surge out from behind him. Not good. Shi Shenhong's expression changed greatly. He had yet to turn around when a series of purplish-gold great swords already slashed over, blasting into the depths of his forehead. A total of 49 purplish-gold great swords slammed into Shi Shenhong's divine soul. Terrifying sword intent wreaked havoc and bombarded his divine soul without the slightest scruple, as if wanting to blow his entire divine soul into smithereens. Even if Shi Shenhong's divine soul had already reached shattering heaven 7 transformations, being bombarded by 49 purplish-gold greatswords still turned his divine soul into a complete mess. Sikong Chiyu, you actually dare to join forces with this ant. You deserve to die. Shi Shenhong was enraged. He erupted with a powerful divine domain, instantly suppressing Sikong Chiyu's divine domain. At the same time, he smashed a fist over ruthlessly. Sikong Chiyu's expression changed slightly. She turned around and blasted out a punch. Then, she discovered to her horror that Shi Shenhong's offensive was seriously too terrifying. She suddenly vomited a mouthful of blood and retreated repeatedly. Chapter 38-71. At this moment, Shi Shenhong wasn't feeling too good either. He had lost the initiative to begin with. Sikong Chiyu's sneak attack succeeded, and then Zhuowen's 49 purplish-gold greatswords pierced into his divine soul. He had already suffered considerable internal injuries. Now, after forcefully unleashing his divine domain and forcing Sikong Chiyu back with a punch, he could feel a sense of weakness gradually surging into his heart. But soon his expression changed. He suddenly felt a terrifying pressure surging from the void behind him. He was all too familiar with this pressure. Wasn't it the pressure of the 3-fire true mirror that he felt in the Hong Martial Divine Sect? This ant, he can actually use the 3-fire true mirror again. Shi Shenhong suddenly turned around. He saw Zhuowen's right hand tightly grasping a rather broken bronze mirror. But it was this inconspicuous bronze mirror that had annihilated almost all of the higher-ups in the Hong Martial Divine Sect. Moreover, it had even destroyed 2/5 of the sect's territory. Ant, die. Shi Shenhong's killing intense sword. He could tell that Zhuowen needed a period of time to gather power to forcefully activate the 3-fire true mirror. And this period of time was enough for him to get close to Zhuowen and kill him. Therefore, Shi Shenhong attacked without hesitation. He punched out, and a terrifying fist imprint as vast as a mountain appeared in the sky. When the enormous fist imprint appeared and landed on Zhuowen's body, a figure blocked in front of Zhuowen and similarly punched out, blocking the fist imprint. The figure that blocked in front of Zhuowen was Sikong Chiyu. Zhuowen, use the three-fire true mirror's power as much as you want. I'll block Shunhong's attack for you during this period of time, Sikong Chiyu said calmly. Zhuowen didn't say anything. Instead, he channeled the energy in his body into the three-fire true mirror at an even faster speed. The terrifying blood flames became even more violent, shooting straight into the sky and igniting a boundless sea of blood flames. Sikong Chiyu, you still haven't realized your mistake? If you kneel in front of me and beg for mercy, perhaps I'll let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Shunhong was both shocked and furious. This Sikong Chiyu was truly too despicable. She actually dared to obstruct him at this crucial moment. Sikong Chiyu sneered. She didn't answer Shunhong's question. However, the movements of her hands became faster and more powerful. Her attacks became fiercer. Sikong Chiyu, why did you betray the Hong martial divine sect? When have I, Shunhong, treated you? Shunhong saw that he couldn't completely take down Sikong Chiyu in a short period of time. At the same time, he also felt that Zhuowen's aura was getting stronger and stronger. He almost roared in rage, but his heart was filled with doubts. Sikong Chiyu was the second in command of the Hong martial divine sect. Her position and authority were only below him. He still found it somewhat hard to believe that Sikong Chiyu would betray him. This was simply illogical. Sikong Chiyu did her best to resist Shunhong's attacks. Suddenly, she opened her mouth and said, Shunhong, do you still remember the Xi family? Shunhong was stunned and subconsciously muttered to himself, Xi family. Ho, you're really an eminent person with short memory. 10,000 years ago, the number one family in Central State, the Xi family. Could it be that you forgot? Sikong Chiyu's eyes seethed with killing intent as he growled. Emin, you're a remnant of the Xi family? The Xi family actually still has people alive. Shunhong looked at Sikong Chiyu in surprise. But Sikong Chiyu smiled. It was just that his smile was filled with a piercingly cold intent. 10,000 years ago, the number one family in Central State, the Xi family, had boundless glory. They were the true number one force in Central State in name. Even the Hong martial divine sect back then was somewhat inferior compared to the Xi family. But on a certain night 10,000 years ago, a group of over a dozen experts entered the Xi family and instantly killed the Xi family's upper echelons and exterminated the entire Xi family. And the Xi family's number one expert, Xi Xinyong, a middle-stage divine realm transformation mighty expert, actually died a violent death too. Sikong Chiyu's real name was Si Satama. 1,000 years ago, he had once headed to the Li Yuan main region to train. But after he returned from training, what he saw were the Xi family's ruins as well as corpses buried in the ruins. Back then, Si Satama knelt in the ruins and kowtowed heavily, swearing that he would definitely find the culprit and avenge the Xi family. Then, he wiped his tears and left the Xi family's ruins. After several hundred years of investigation, he finally found out the reason why the Xi family was exterminated and the culprit. Back then, the one who exterminated the Xi family was Hong Marshal Shengzhen's divine devil transformation expert. And the reason why Hong Marshal Shengzhen's experts moved out was because the Xi family hid a clue regarding a rank 5-star soldier. A rank 5-star soldier was far superior to a rank 4-star soldier. It had almost never appeared in Central State. Even in the Li Yuan main region, a rank 5-star soldier was an extremely rare treasure. Although the Xi family didn't possess a true rank 5-star soldier, just this clue alone was enough to bring about a calamity of extermination. Originally, this clue was the Xi family's biggest secret and should have been kept very well. Outsiders shouldn't know about it at all. However, back then, the Xi family's patriarch and Hong martial divine sect's patriarch Shunhong were best friends. During a conversation, Xi family's patriarch Xi Xinyong accidentally revealed this clue and instructed Shunhong to never reveal this information. Shunhong naturally promised repeatedly, But when he returned to Hong Martial Divine Sect, he immediately reported this matter to Hong Martial Shengzhen's upper echelons. What happened next was naturally self-evident. Hong Martial Shengzhen sent out experts at the Divine Devil transformation and exterminated the Xi family in a single night. And because Shi Shanhong was meritorious for revealing this secret, he was rewarded with many cultivation resources. Originally, Shi Shanhong's aptitude wasn't particularly good. But because of these cultivation resources, his cultivation rose steadily over the past 10,000 years, and he jumped into the mid-stage God domain transformation. Moreover, he smoothly became the sect master of Hong Martial Divine Sect. After Si Qiyu found out about this, he had already made up his mind to kill Shi Shanhong. Thus, he changed his name to Si Qiyu and smoothly entered Hong Martial Divine Sect. Moreover, under continuous cultivation, his cultivation smoothly reached the early stage God domain transformation. However, Si Qiyu knew that his aptitude was limited. The early stage God domain transformation was already his limit. Unless he came across an unexpected opportunity, it would be difficult for him to advance. However, Shi Shanhong was different. He had made a great contribution and was rewarded with many resources and powerful divine artifacts by Hong Martial Shengzhen. Unless his cultivation was stronger than Shi Shanhong, there was no way he could kill Shi Shanhong. Back then, he cooperated with Luo Lingyu because Luo Lingyu's aptitude was much better than his. He believed that Luo Lingyu would definitely surpass Shi Shanhong one day and kill him. Therefore, he proposed to cooperate and let Luo Lingyu go. But now, not only did Zhuan obtain the three-fire true mirror, but he also gained the recognition of the artifact spirit and could use the three-fire true mirror's power. The three-fire true mirror's power was much stronger than his. He believed that the three-fire true mirror could heavily injure or even kill Shi Shanhong. Chapter 3872. Shi Shanhong, you must die today. Sikong Qiyu recalled the annihilated Xi clan, and her eyes became incomparably red. Her attacks became even fiercer. Shi Shanhong's complexion was not too good. Although he could feel the faintly discernible hostility from Sikong Qiyu towards him in the past, he had always thought that Sikong Qiyu was the successor of the Xi clan. But he had always thought that this was because Sikong Qiyu coveted his position as sect master. Although he was on guard, he didn't care too much about it, because as far as he was concerned, with Sikong Chiyu's natural talent and strength, once he stepped down from the position of sect master in the future, he would naturally pass the position of sect master to Sikong Chiyu. But what he didn't expect was that Sikong Chiyu revealing hostility towards him was entirely because of Xi clan's matter. This was a situation of life and death. Sikong Chiyu, get out of my way. Sure, Shanhong roared, but his heart was strong but not enough. His divine soul still retained the sword intent of the purple-gold greatsword. He was barely able to resist this sword intent and was unable to unleash all of his strength. Sikong Chiyu naturally also saw Shi Shanhong's decline. Her attacks became fiercer and fiercer, more and more terrifying. She very well carried out the principle of taking your life while you're down. Senior Sikong, get out of the way. Suddenly, Zhuan's solemn voice came from behind Sikong Chiyu. Sikong Chiyu was overjoyed. She desperately used her strongest attack and broke away from Shi Shanhong's battle. Then, she saw Zhuan behind her, holding the Tri-Fire True Mirror in one hand. And above him, an endless sea of blood flames rapidly condensed into a blood mountain burning with raging blood flames. Zhuan's gaze was cold and emotionless. His right hand formed a sword finger pointing to the horizon, and then suddenly swung down. The blood mountain in the sky fell down at a terrifying speed, leaving behind a bright blood trail in the air. Shi Shanhong's pupils shrank. He wanted to retreat, but no matter how he retreated, he was already locked on by the blood mountain's aura. So what if he retreated? The blood mountain's speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it landed on Shi Shanhong's body. Immediately after, the terrifying blood flames exploded. The deafening explosion engulfed the surrounding several trillion miles. As for Zhuowen and Sikong Chiyu, the two of them had already left in advance. The valley below and the endless mountain range around the valley were all gradually annihilated, disappearing and collapsing in the blood flames. In the end, the mountain range became a bottomless abyss. Above the abyss, endless bloody flames burned as if they would never be extinguished. Pucci, Zhuowen suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and his complexion was ghastly pale. He swiftly withdrew the tri-fired true mirror and subconsciously distanced himself from Sikong Chiyu. Sikong Chiyu glanced indifferently at Zhuowen and said, "Zhuowen, don't worry. I, Sikong Chiyu, am not such a lowly person. It was all thanks to your help that I was able to kill Shi Shanhong. I can swear that I won't snatch the three-fire true mirror from you, and I owe you a favor." Zhuowen still looked at Sikong Chiyu vigilantly. He was not a newborn calf. Just based on Sikong Chiyu's words, he would not foolishly believe it. Sikong Chiyu did not care about the suspicious look in Zhuowen's eyes either. Instead, his gaze landed on that valley where Shi Shanhong was at. More accurately speaking, it was already not a valley now, but a bottomless abyss. Above this abyss, boundless bloody flames floated. He revealed a trace of relief. He truly could not sense Shi Shanhong's aura anymore. Under such a horrifying attack, Sikong Chiyu thought that this Shi Shanhong should not be able to survive either. But it was at this instant that Sikong Chiyu relaxed that a strong, ominous feeling welled up in his heart. It was only to see a divine spear suddenly extend out of the void behind Sikong Chiyu, swiftly sweeping towards Sikong Chiyu's back. Sikong Chiyu's pupils constricted, but his reaction was extremely fast. The instant the divine spear swept over, his body immediately shifted to one side, dodging the sure-hit divine spear. But the divine spear's speed was too fast. Even though Sikong Chiyu avoided his vitals, he was still struck by this divine spear on his left shoulder blade. It was only to see fresh blood spurt out from his left shoulder blade. Sikong Chiyu gave a muffled groan and fell down from midair in a sorry state. When Sikong Chiyu barely managed to stabilize his figure in midair, the divine spear in the void vortex swept out completely. And what came out together with the divine spear was also a figure. Shi Shanhong? Sikong Chiyu's pupils constricted, only feeling incredulous as he stared fixedly at this man holding the divine spear. He was precisely Shi Shanhong. It was just that Shi Shanhong was currently in an extremely sorry state. The clothes on his entire body were utterly tattered. Even his hair was burned away by the bloody flames, becoming bald. "You're actually not dead?" Sikong Chiyu looked at Shi Shanhong in disbelief. Under such a horrifying attack, apart from Shi Shanhong being a little wretched, he did not suffer too many injuries. Shi Shanhong grinned and said, "Sikong Chiyu, your understanding of me is still too little. Do you know what the divine spear in my hand is?" Only then did Sikong Chiyu's attention land on the divine spear in Shi Shanhong's hand. He sensed the berserk aura flowing out from inside the divine spear. His pupils constricted, and he said in a low voice, "This is a heaven-breaking rank 7 divine artifact." "Ha! Yes, this spear is called Limitless Space Piercing Spear. It's connected to a certain dimensional space. The power of the three-fire true mirror is indeed very powerful. But I made use of this spear to enter the dimensional space and avoid that level of attack." Shi Shanhong's eyes became increasingly pleased with himself. His right hand suddenly waved. A horrifying spear intent swept out, turning into a violent gale, rumbling towards the Zhuowen not far away. Originally, Zhuowen planned on fleeing right away the instant Shi Shanhong appeared. Now, seeing Shi Shanhong's attack with his eyes, he knew that he could not leave anymore. His eyes revealed a trace of ruthlessness. He took out several purple-gold greatswords and slashed on top of this spear intent. Pucci, Zhuowen discovered to his shock that the purple-gold greatswords were easily minced by the spear intent. Then they landed directly on his body. His entire body blossomed with bright blood, and his entire person fell to the ground in a sorry state. In the instant Zhuowen landed on the ground, Shi Shenhong moved. He shot out like lightning. His target was shockingly Zhuowen. Zhuowen used the 3-fire true mirror one after another and was already unbearably weak. How could he possibly be Shi Shenhong's match? The instant Shi Shenhong landed beside him, he punched Zhuowen in the abdomen. Zhuowen suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and knelt on the ground on one knee. His breathing became extremely hurried. Shi Shenhong took out a ring and took it out, enveloping Zhuowen's surroundings. It turned into a golden light screen, wrapping Zhuowen's entire person inside. After doing these, Shi Shenhong no longer paid attention to Zhuowen. Instead, he rushed out explosively, heading towards Sikong Chiyu not far away. Chapter 38-73. Sikong Chiyu was frightened out of his wits. The instant Shi Shenhong bound Zhuowen, he unleashed his movement technique and desperately fled into the distance. After the Tri-Fire True Mirror's attack failed, he knew that he no longer had the chance to kill Shi Shenhong. Rumble. A terrifying momentum resounded from the space beside Sikong Chiyu. Then, that space collapsed as a divine spear brimming with mighty divine might shot towards Sikong Chiyu's ribs at an extremely tricky angle. Sikong Chiyu's pupils constricted. His feet took a profound step, barely dodging this divine spear. The divine spear swept past his side, and then, under Sikong Chiyu's disbelieving gaze, the divine spear suddenly swept, the body of the spear heavily smashing into Sikong Chiyu's ribs. Puchi! Sikong Chiyu spat out a mouthful of blood. His figure flew out in a sorry state. The terrifying spear intent drilled into his body like maggots, wantonly destroying all the meridians in his body. A palm suddenly grasped the divine spear's handle, and then the space shattered, and Shi Shenhong's tyrannical figure stepped out. I'm a person who cherishes talent. If you weren't a member of the C family, I would definitely spare your life. Speaking up to here, Shi Shenhong sighed rather regretfully and continued, Unfortunately, you're actually a member of the C family, so you must die. Rumble. As soon as his voice fell, Shi Shenhong's eyes surged with killing intent. His right foot took a step forward, and layers of phantoms overlapped in the air, and he appeared in front of Sikong Chiyu before the phantoms disappeared. Sikong Chiyu sighed lightly. He knew that he couldn't escape death today. Since he had to die in the end, he would rather die in battle. Clang! A piercing cold light rose and broke through the sky. Sikong Chiyu drew his divine saber, his eyes overflowing with battle intent, and saber light flickered. Futile resistance. Shi Shenhong's eyes flashed with ridicule. The divine spear in his hand swept out, and the spear flickered with vast divine might. Only to hear a clang, the saber and spear collided, and dazzling sparks burst forth in the void. Layers of formless energy ripples spread out in all directions in a ring-shaped direction. With the divine spear in hand, Shi Shenhong's attacks were grand and powerful. He was like an invincible god. Sikong Chiyu practically resisted with all his might, and he exerted all his ability. But the numerous layers of saber insight he executed were all easily dealt with by Shi Shenhong. Sikong Chiyu discovered sorrowfully that the disparity between her and Shi Shenhong was too great. It wasn't just because of the difference in cultivation, but also because of the divine artifacts they possessed. Sikong Chiyu's divine saber was only a rank 6 divine weapon, while Shi Shenhong's divine spear was a rank 7 divine weapon. The two simply weren't on the same level. Kacha! The two of them exchanged a few hundred moves in succession. Suddenly, the divine blade in Sikong Chiyu's hand emitted a sound that caused one's heart to palpitate. After that, Sikong Chiyu discovered to her astonishment that countless cracks had appeared on the surface of her divine blade. These cracks were as messy and dense as a spider web, and they continued to spread out from the surface of the blade as if they were alive. Finally, with a crisp sound, the divine blade collapsed, shattering into countless metal pieces. Shi Shenhong laughed nastily. His right hand that was holding the spear suddenly tightened. Then, with a shake of his wrist, the divine spear swept over and smashed into Sikong Chiyu's chest. Puffed. Sikong Chiyu spat out a mouthful of blood. Her chest caved in several inches, and she fell from the sky in a sorry state. After smashing through several mountain peaks, she finally collapsed in a valley. Shi Shenhong landed in the valley expressionlessly. He silently looked at Sikong Chiyu, who was lying in the center of the valley. Sikong Chiyu also silently looked at Shi Shenhong. Her eyes revealed despair and resentment. Sikong Chiyu, your greatest failure was to cooperate with that Aunt Zhuowen and prematurely exposed your identity. Shi Shenhong said indifferently. Winner takes all. There's nothing to say about this. After Sikong Chiyu said this, she silently closed her eyes. She had already accepted her fate. She had concealed herself for close to 10,000 years just to kill Shi Shenhong. But after today, she had lost all of her chances. She couldn't even keep her life. Shi Shenhong was expressionless. Divine power surged in his right palm, manifesting a divine power rope that completely bound Sikong Chiyu. Shi Shenhong lifted Sikong Chiyu and left the valley. After a short while, he once again arrived at Zhuowen's location. He saw Zhuowen sitting dispiritedly inside the light shield formed by the ring. He heard the sound of Shi Shenhong's figure flashing past and slowly raised his head. His eyes were filled with unwillingness. Shi Shenhong silently looked at the light shield's surface that was slightly dim. He sneered and said, "This ring is also a heaven-breaking rank 7 divine artifact. In your current state, you can't break it all. No need to struggle in vain." Zhuowen's face was gloomy, especially when he saw the half-dead Sikong Chiyu in Shi Shenhong's hand. A trace of despair rose in his heart. The gap between him and Shi Shenhong was really too big. His current cultivation was only at the middle stage of the Void God transformation. Even his divine soul cultivation was only at the heaven-breaking 6th transformation. The reason why he dared to cooperate with Sikong Chiyu to deal with Shi Shenhong was mainly because of the 3-Fire True Mirror's power. Unfortunately, the 3-Fire True Mirror failed on the verge of success in the end. And now, he had no means to deal with Shi Shenhong at all. Right now, he was a fish on Shi Shenhong's chopping board, at his mercy. Shi Shenhong saw Zhuowen remain silent, and his brows furrowed slightly. He continued, "You don't have to pretend to be mute. Hand over the 3-Fire True Mirror now, and perhaps I might be lenient." Zhuowen sneered and still didn't speak. He knew that it was useless to say anything. Shi Shenhong snorted coldly. He lifted Zhuowen by the collar and unceremoniously tore off the spirit ring on his finger. However, after his divine sense destroyed the restrictions on the surface of the spirit ring, his expression instantly became ugly, because he only found a small amount of chaos crystals and low-grade divine medicines in the spirit ring. There was no trace of the 3-Fire True Mirror at all. "Speak. Where exactly is the 3-Fire True Mirror? You actually have another world on you?" As Shi Shenhong spoke, he suddenly let out a soft sound of surprise. When his divine sense swept over Zhuowen's body, he detected an abnormality. Zhuowen's expression changed slightly. His great world had always been hidden very well. Ordinary cultivators wouldn't be able to detect it at all. Could it be that Shi Shenhong could detect his great world? Shi Shenhong's divine sense swept over again, and a trace of mockery appeared in his eyes. Then, Zhuowen saw Shi Shenhong holding the divine spear and suddenly thrust it at his shoulder. All of a sudden, wherever the divine spear passed by, the surrounding space would collapse. Shi Shenhong's divine spear was called the Boundless Sky Piercing Spear. It could pass through most dimensional spaces at will. Zhuowen's great world could actually be considered a type of dimensional space. With the characteristics of the Boundless Sky Piercing Spear, it wasn't difficult to break through dimensional spaces and find Zhuowen's great world. Puffed. Zhuowen's shoulder blade was pierced, and blood spurted out, forming a bright rain of blood in the air, rustling as it fell. Chapter 3874. Dokio opened his eyes and looked at the slovenly Taoist in confusion. "Master, what's wrong?" he asked. As soon as Dokio finished speaking, the entire macro world began to shake violently. Waves tens of thousands of feet high rose from the lake beside them. The ground around them began to crack, forming terrifying fissures. It was as if a deep abyss had appeared. "Master, what's going on?" Fear appeared on Dao Jing's face, and his entire body trembled. By his side, the foolish smile on Dao Kong's face disappeared completely. He hugged his head and squatted on the ground, trembling non-stop. Boom! The sky of the great world was torn open, and a divine spear swept up a piercingly cold hurricane, surging out violently before finally stabbing heavily into the ground. The slovenly Taoist's pupils constricted. He saw a figure standing on one leg at the end of the divine spear. He crossed his arms and looked down coldly at the slovenly Taoist. "Sure, Shanhong." The slovenly Taoist's expression changed drastically. He did not expect Sure Shanhong to enter Zhuowen's macro world. "Where is Zhuowen?" the slovenly Taoist roared. Sure Shanhong looked at the slovenly Taoist in surprise. "Hong Shenwu, you can't even protect yourself now. Why are you worried about others?" The slovenly Taoist clenched his fists tightly. He glared at Sure Shanhong and said, "Zhuowen is from the Hong sect. What did you do to him?" Sure Shanhong's eyes flashed with a hint of mockery. He shook his head and answered, "He's not far from death, but you don't have to worry. You'll follow in his footsteps soon." The slovenly Taoist roared angrily. Overwhelming righteousness erupted from his body. He flew into the air like a man of light and charged toward Sure Shanhong. Sure Shanhong shook his head. He opened his right hand and clawed at the air. The surrounding space seemed to have been captured by an invisible force, and it came to a complete standstill. On the other hand, the slovenly Taoist priest who was flying over with the help of the righteous Qi suddenly stopped. It was as if time had stopped as he remained motionless in midair. "Hong Shenwu, your cultivation is too weak. Moreover, the nature energy is only effective against evil spirits. It doesn't have much effect on cultivators. In my eyes, you're even more useless than that Zhuowen." Sure Shanhong fiercely swung, and Hong Shenwu was heavily thrown to the ground. The entire ground shook as if it had exploded. The slovenly Taoist priest grunted and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was unbelievably pale. "Master, are you all right?" Dokio hurried to the sloppy Taoist and helped him up. He looked at Sure Shanhong in horror. Sure Shanhong said indifferently, "I'll deal with you guys later." With that, Sure Shanhong turned into a stream of light and disappeared from the lake. Sure Shanhong's spiritual will swept through the entire great world like a hurricane. He was searching for the exact location of the three-fire true mirror. Not long after, Sure Shanhong found the three fires true mirror at the bottom of an enormous mountain range. It really is the three fires true mirror. This time, I've really searched high and low for it, only to find it by chance. Sure Shanhong held a broken bronze mirror in his hand and couldn't help but laugh at the sky. This time, his harvest was too rich. Not only did he obtain the three fires true mirror, but he also obtained the Heaven and Earth Righteous Sutra that he had always dreamed of. This was simply killing two birds with one stone. Sure Shanhong returned to the lake again, only to see that the three people were no longer there. Sure Shanhong repeatedly scanned the surroundings of a lake with his spiritual will, but he didn't find any traces of the slovenly Taoist priest. Not good. An inexplicable sense of danger rose in Sure Shanhong's mind. Then, the entire great world began to collapse, sweeping up an extremely terrifying, explosive energy. The entire great world exploded, collapsed, and compressed. Damn it, this ant is actually self-destructing the great world. Sure Shanhong shouted in horror. Without even thinking, he used the peerless sky-piercing spear to break open space intending to leave the great world. However, he was still too late. The explosive energy had already spread over, and his left arm was immediately annihilated into powder. However, he managed to enter the dimensional space that the spear had broken open in time. At this moment, Zhuon in the outside world endured the injuries on his body and released the 3 people from the great world. Then, he took out the divine ship and immediately fled into the distance. "Zhuon, are you all right?" The slovenly Taoist priest asked worriedly when he saw Zhuon kneeling on one knee on the ground. His breathing was rapid, and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. "I won't die for now," Zhuon smiled bitterly. His current condition was really too bad. In addition, he had taken the initiative to self-destruct the great world. Even his own foundation was damaged as a result. Boom! Suddenly, a broken divine spear pierced through the air and blasted the side of the divine ship. With a thunderous explosion, the divine ship in midair suddenly collapsed. Terrifying sounds of explosions erupted from the hull of the ship. Zhuon's expression changed drastically. He roared and waved his sleeve, sweeping the 3 people into his sleeve. Then, he dragged his heavily injured body out of the divine ship. "Die, you ant!" Not long after Zhuon had flown out of the divine ship, a loud roar rang out. Shunhong had struck Zhuon's back with his palm. Zhuon grunted and spat out a mouthful of blood. He fell heavily from midair and crashed into the ground. In the deep pit, Zhuon forced himself to his feet. With a wave of his sleeve, the 3 people appeared beside him. "Sectmaster, you guys go first." Zhuon's eyes shone with a deep chill. He coldly looked at Shunhong in the sky. He already knew that he couldn't leave now. Shunhong definitely wouldn't let him go. Since he had to die in the end, he chose to let the 3 people live. He would hold Shunhong back. At this moment, Shunhong was in an extremely sorry state. His right arm had exploded, and his left leg was missing. 2 fist-sized bloody holes had appeared in his chest, revealing the ghastly white bones inside. Just now, the self-destruction of the great world had caused him too much damage. Now, he didn't even have a tenth of his strength left. And all of this had been done by the ant below. "Ant, I'll definitely kill you." Shunhong roared like a wild beast. He was so angry that he'd almost lost his mind. Right now, there was only one thought in his mind, and that was to completely destroy Zhuon and tear him to pieces. Only then would he be satisfied. Zhuon forced himself to his feet. His eyes were almost squinted. His eyelids were just too heavy. If not for his willpower, he would have closed his eyes completely. Suddenly, in his blurry vision, a figure blocked his way. He looked up in confusion. He could barely see that the figure was very sloppy, and his clothes were very dirty. "Sectmaster," Zhuon muttered to himself. "Zhuon, I've cultivated the universal sutra of heaven and earth for tens of thousands of years, and it's not like I haven't gained anything. With your chi refinement chapter, I've comprehended a new level and obtained new techniques. Today, it's time for this incompetent sect master to protect you." The sloppy Taoist suddenly turned his head and smiled at Zhuon. Chapter 3875. Zhuon saw the shabby Taoist master's body emit a golden light that was tens of thousands of feet long. It surrounded his body, and an unprecedentedly powerful aura surged out. It was as if the slovenly Taoist man's accumulated energy was unleashed at that moment. After that, Zhuon felt that his body was being pushed by a force, and he was floating towards the back. He could only watch helplessly as the distance between him and the slovenly Taoist man widened. "Faction leader, your righteous energy is no match for Shunhong," Zhuon almost screamed. He wanted to stop the slovenly Taoist man. He waved his hands in the air as if he wanted to pull the slovenly Taoist man back. Unfortunately, it was all in vain. He was too weak. He was too weak to even trust a chicken. "Zhuon, take Daokong and Dokyo and leave this place. I'm old and I've lived long enough. The future of the Hong sect depends on you. I don't ask you to bring the Hong sect to greater heights. I just hope that you can keep the Hong sect alive. Even if it's just a feeble existence, you have to keep the Hong sect alive. Don't let the Hong sect's legacy end in my hands. And Dao Kong and Dokyo, you're older than them. You're their big brother. You have to take good care of them. Don't let them suffer. The slovenly Taoist priest slowly turned around and looked at Zhuowen. The tears at the corners of his eyes became more obvious. Zhuowen looked at the slovenly Taoist man in silence. He saw the tears on the slovenly Taoist man's face. He saw the sadness in the slovenly Taoist man's eyes. His heart trembled. His eyes reddened. He could feel the slovenly Taoist man's determination to die. He knew that the slovenly Taoist man was going to give it his all. He wanted to buy time for himself, Dao Kong, and Dokyo to escape. Hong Shenwu, you think a piece of trash like you can stop me? Shi Shenhong gloomily looked at Hong Shenwu, the corners of his mouth revealing a mocking smile. The slovenly Taoist man's eyes were calm. The golden light that surged out of his body became brighter and brighter. Whether or not I'm trash, you'll know soon enough. Hong Shenwu's voice was like thunder, resounding through the heavens and earth. It was vast and mighty like a great bell. Shi Shenhong's expression changed. He actually felt an unprecedented sense of danger from Hong Shenwu's voice. Boom! Suddenly, Hong Shenwu moved. It was fine if he didn't move, but once he did, he shocked heaven and earth. In the blink of an eye, Hong Shenwu appeared in front of Shi Shenhong. His fists shot out like lightning, bringing with them golden light as they smashed towards Shi Shenhong. Shi Shenhong raised his spear and struck out. Instantly, it collided with Hong Shenwu's fist. Shi Shenhong's expression also changed. The scene of absolute suppression that he had imagined didn't happen at all. Hong Shenwu's fists were as hard as metal. When they collided with the divine spear, a series of clanging sounds could be heard. Moreover, each collision was like a force of 10,000 caddies, bringing great pressure to Shi Shenhong. Shi Shenhong's expression changed greatly. His heart was filled with doubt. Didn't Hong Shenwu's righteous energy only have a suppressive effect on evil spirits? It shouldn't have any effect on cultivators. But now, Hong Shenwu seemed to have been reborn. He could actually transform the righteous energy into his own strength and suppress Shi Shenhong. Not far away, Zhuowen, who was protecting Dao Kong and Dokyo, also looked at Hong Shenwu in shock. The power Hong Shenwu was displaying now was actually similar to his vast Grand Mist God Force, even though they were different methods. This was because he sensed both the overwhelming righteous aura and the primordial aura from the power Hong Shenwu was displaying. Zhuowen recalled the scene he had seen in the secret room in the ruins of the Hong sect. His expression couldn't help but become complicated. At that time, he hadn't been able to confirm Hong Shenwu's identity. But now, he was certain that Hong Shenwu was the founder of the Hong sect. However, what Zhuowen didn't understand was that Hong Shenwu had successfully merged the righteous energy and Grand Mist aura into a new power. Moreover, this new power didn't just have a suppressive effect on evil spirits. It also had a strong suppressive effect on ordinary cultivators. Then why didn't Hong Shenwu use this new power to resist those cultivators who came to rob the Hong sect? Zhuowen suddenly recalled the sloppy Taoist gaze when he pushed him away. His heart trembled. He had an ominous feeling. The reason why the sloppy Taoist hadn't used this new power was very likely that there were great restrictions on using it. Otherwise, there was no way he wouldn't have used it earlier. Boom, boom, boom. In the air, the sloppy Taoist and Shi Shenhong continuously clashed, erupting with terrifying energy ripples. Zhuowen, along with Dao Kong and Dokyo, could only silently watch all this from afar. How is this possible? Hong Shenwu, who are you? Why do you have this power? A miserable cry came from midair. Shi Shenhong's wretched figure fell from the clouds. Zhuowen focused his eyes and saw that the divine spear in Shi Shenhong's hand had broken into two. His body was also covered in blood. Although Shi Shenhong was strong, he had experienced the battle between Sikong Chiyu and Zhuowen and was already heavily injured. Moreover, after Hong Shenwu erupted with this new power, not only was his strength not inferior to Shi Shenhong at his peak, it was even stronger. Boom! When Shi Shanhong fell in midair, an intense golden light suddenly appeared above the clouds. Then, a figure appeared in the golden light and quickly fell, catching up to Shi Shanhong's figure. This figure was the sloppy Taoist. His gaze was cold and emotionless. He silently looked at Shi Shanhong and punched out, smashing onto Shi Shanhong's chest. Hong Shenwu. Shi Shanhong roared towards the sky. The energy in his body was like a water pump that was operating to the limit. It quickly surged and enveloped his body. He knew that he couldn't dodge and could only take this attack head-on. Boom! In midair, the two figures collided. Then, Zhuan heard Shi Shanhong's miserable cry. He saw Shi Shanhong's figure rapidly fall downwards, smashing into a valley and creating a huge crater. Hong Shenwu floated in midair. He flipped his right hand, and a spirit ring appeared in his palm. He threw the spirit ring to Zhuan and said, "Zhuan, this is Shi Shanhong's spirit ring. There's something inside that belongs to you. Take it." Zhuan subconsciously took the spirit ring and scanned it with his divine sense. He indeed found the three-fired true mirror inside. "Hong Shenwu, you forced me to do this." Below the ground, in the crater, Shi Shanhong roared towards the sky, his eyes scarlet and bloodthirsty. His injuries were too severe, but they could not suppress the crazy anger in the depths of his heart. He was completely enraged. Like a wounded beast, he let out a heart-palpitating howl. Chapter 3876. Hongwu's Sacred Scroll. Hong Shenwu's expression changed when he saw the scroll. Hong Shenwu roared and dropped down from the sky, charging at Shi Shanhong. "Hong Shenwu, it's too late. I originally planned to monopolize the secrets on your bodies. But now, I'm afraid I can't. Then I can only ask Hongwu Shengzhen's experts to deal with you." Shi Shanhong sneered. He bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood on the scroll. Then, he repeatedly formed seals with his hands, forming an extremely profound seal. Then, Shi Shanhong threw the scroll. The scroll flew into the air, bursting with a blazing light. Wherever this strange light appeared, space collapsed inch by inch, forming a whirlpool that Daokong could pass through. This whirlpool was pitch black, as if it connected to some kind of space. In the depths of this whirlpool, there was a powerful and terrifying power surging. An arm suddenly stretched out from the whirlpool and tore. The surface of the whirlpool immediately collapsed inch by inch, shattering into countless fragments. Then the 5 fingers of the arm clenched into a fist and suddenly punched out. Its target was Hong Shenwu, who was diving down from the sky. Hong Shenwu's expression changed greatly. His right hand formed a palm, and with the help of the vast primordial energy, he struck out. The purple-gold energy poured out like a tidal wave, covering the entire space. It was so mighty that it caused the entire space to collapse and collapse. When the fist and palm collided, the energy ripples exploded and spread out in all directions in the form of a ring. Then, Hong Shenwu let out a muffled groan and was sent flying like a falling leaf. Blood gushed out like a broken faucet, following Hong Shenwu's flight, continuously flying out in midair, blood splashing into the heavens. "Master!" Dokyo couldn't help but call out worriedly when he saw Hong Shenwu being repelled. Zhuan's pupils constricted. He looked at the arm that stretched out from the whirlpool with extreme fear. The pressure that the arm gave him was too great. It was much more terrifying than Shi Shanhong at his peak. They weren't on the same level at all. Fiend God transformation powerhouse. Zhuan's eyes darkened. He stared at the whirlpool and thought of a possibility that he didn't want to think of. Shi Shanhong had summoned a Fiend God transformation expert from Shenzhen. Rumble. The vortex in the void completely cracked open, and a stalwart figure slowly walked out from the crack in the space fragments. It was a middle-aged man with a scar between his eyebrows. It looked like he had been stabbed by some kind of sharp weapon. He coldly looked at Hong Shenwu, who was sent flying by him. and then turned around to look at Shi Shanhong, saying indifferently, Shi Shanhong, what happened? You actually used a god summoning scroll to summon me. Shi Shanhong lowered his head and said respectfully, Lord Gu, this is a big matter for you. It's an even greater contribution. Oh, what is it? The middle-aged man's interest was piqued as he asked indifferently. It's about the universal scripture of heaven and earth. Shi Shanhong said respectfully. The middle-aged man's body trembled, and then he stared at Shi Shanhong with a fanatical expression, saying, Is that true? You found the universal scripture of heaven and earth? Shi Shanhong was rather calm, saying, The universal scripture of heaven and earth is on Hong Shenwu. The energy he used just now was righteous energy. Lord Gu should have discovered it. The middle-aged man laughed and took a step forward, charging like a ghost towards Hong Shenwu, who was smashed into a mountain peak. Shi Shanhong, you've done a great service today. If this person really has the universal scripture of heaven and earth, then Hong Wu Shengzhen won't forget to reward you. The middle-aged man's grand voice reverberated through the heavens and earth. Shi Shanhong revealed a trace of a bitter smile. He had no choice but to do this. If he could deal with Hong Shenwu, he wouldn't have given up the universal scripture of heaven and earth. After all, the universal scripture of heaven and earth was too important. After it was taken away by Hong Wu Shengzhen, it was impossible for him to cultivate it. But he had no choice. If it didn't summon Hong Wu Shengzhen's experts, he might have been killed by Hong Shenwu. After smashing through several mountains, Hong Shenwu finally landed inside a mountain peak. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and the purple-gold energy in his body quickly circulated, forcing him to stand up. Then, his expression changed greatly as he saw the middle-aged man rush out of the whirlpool. After exchanging a few words with Shi Shanhong, the middle-aged man rushed towards him. He instantly understood that the middle-aged man was Hong Wu Shengzhen's expert. His cultivation was around the celestial demon transformation, and he was currently unable to contend with him. Thinking of this, Hong Shenwu suddenly rushed out of the mountain peak and rushed towards Zhuowen. Hurry up and leave this place. Hong Shenwu roared, and with a wave of his sleeve, purple-gold energy surged out, turning into a purple-gold whirlpool that sucked in Zhuowen's group. Zhuowen, take good care of Dao Kong and Dokio, and I'll leave the Dao sect to you. Hong Shenwu looked at the somewhat dazed Zhuowen in the whirlpool, and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a gentle smile. Then, Hong Shenwu's sleeve suddenly rolled up, and the purple-gold whirlpool disappeared in front of him. After doing this, Hong Shenwu slowly turned around and coldly looked at the middle-aged man in front of him. The middle-aged man wasn't in a hurry to make a move. Instead, his aura firmly locked on a Hong Shenwu, and his gaze carefully sized up Hong Shenwu in front of him, as if he was scanning for prey. He naturally saw Hong Shenwu's small movements, but he didn't care. Shi Shanhong had already told him that the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra was on this person, so he only cared about this person. Gu Yunfei looked at Shi Shanhong with shining eyes and grinned. I'm Hong Wu Shengzhen Gu Yunfei. The Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra is on you? Is indeed on me, Hong Shenwu calmly replied. Then hand it over. I can let you live. Gu Yunfei said matter-of-factly. However, Hong Shenwu smiled. He didn't say anything, and the battle intent in his eyes soared into the sky. Then he slowly floated in the air, his body surrounded by a blazing purple-gold light. Gu Yunfei frowned slightly. He knew Hong Shenwu's answer. You're not my match, and you still want to fight me? Gu Yunfei coldly said. Can't I fight just because I'm not your match? It's just death. What's there to fear? Hong Shenwu laughed loudly, and a blazing purple-gold light surged out of his body, rushing into the clouds. Gu Yunfei, let's fight. Today, even if I die, I won't hand over the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra. Hong Shenwu's voice soared into the clouds, resounding between heaven and earth, filled with a heroic flavor. Chapter 3877. The vast sea was sparkling. Under the crimson light of the setting sun, it looked like an endless sea of blood. It looked quite demonic. The originally calm surface of the sea suddenly surged with terrifying waves. A huge beast rushed out of the sea and into the air. Countless waves splashed in all directions. Under the setting sun, it looked so beautiful. Roar. However, the moment the beast jumped into the air, the space around its head suddenly twisted. It screamed and was torn into pieces by the twisting power of the space. Blood rained down from the sky, and the headless corpse of the giant beast also fell into the sea in a sorry state, splashing out countless silver splashes. In an instant, the surrounding sea was dyed blood red. The space shattered and a golden light surged out. Then, Zhuowen, with a dull look, brought Daokong and Dokyo to a reef by the sea. "Senior brother Daokong, will Master be okay?" Dokyo pulled Zhuowen's sleeve and forced a smile on his pale face. Zhuowen looked at Dokyo numbly and said, "Sect leader, you should be okay." "That's good. I'll send a message to Master and tell him our location. You should be able to join us soon." Dokyo seemed to be relieved. He took out the communication jade charm and was about to send a message. A big hand snatched the communication jade charm. Dokyo let out a low cry and looked at Zhuowen in confusion. "Junior brother Dokyo, you stay here and take care of Daokong. I'll go and bring sect leader back." Zhuowen endured the discomfort in his body and smiled at Dokyo. He touched Dokyo's little head and took out several defensive divine artifacts to surround the two little guys. After doing this, Zhuowen comforted Dokyo and summoned 3 divine swords. These 3 swords were the Thunderfire Sword, the Blood Immortal Sword, and the Sacrificial Death Sword. Before the self-destruction of his great world, he had moved most of the things in and out and placed them in many spirit rings on his body. Although Zhuowen had a lot of spirit rings on him, the total amount of space was still far less than the great world. Therefore, Zhuowen had only transferred some of the important things. Many resources were also destroyed because of the explosion. This time, Zhuowen's loss was not small. Xiaohei's shadow hovered above the Thunder Fire Sword's hilt. He looked at Zhuowen with a serious expression and said, "Kid, you're too weak. Don't tell me you're really planning to go back to that dangerous place again?" Although Xiaohei had always lived in the great world, his spiritual had always been observing the situation outside. Xiaohei had naturally seen everything that had happened before, and she also understood the ins and outs of the situation. She knew very well that Zhuowen's current state was extremely poor, and his injuries were extremely serious. In Zhuowen's current state, if he returned to the place where Shi Shanhong wasn't that courting death? "Xiaohei, please take me there. If I don't go, I won't be able to rest in peace for the rest of my life," Zhuowen said resolutely. Xiaohei looked at Zhuowen with a complicated expression. Instead of persuading him, she nodded and roared into the sky. A terrifying sword, Qi, soared into the sky. The Thunder Fire Sword continued to expand until it was dozens of feet long. The thick sword body emitted a piercingly cold light. "Xiaohei, I didn't expect you to have cultivated to such a level." Zhuowen felt the terrifying pressure from the Thunder Fire Sword, and a trace of surprise rose in his heart. During this period of time, he had always been cultivating silently. Even in battle, he relied on himself and rarely summoned Xiaohei to help him. Now, he saw Xiaohei again. He didn't expect that not only did Xiaohei successfully break through the Great World, but she had also reached the 4th level of the Great World. Her cultivation speed was actually not slower than his. Xiaohei revealed a smug expression and said, "Of course. Don't you see how peerless this Dragon Lord's talent is? My aptitude is outstanding. However, this is also partly due to your primordial stone. I've stayed with you for a long time, and I've also absorbed a portion of the primordial aura. Therefore, my comprehension ability has improved greatly, and my cultivation speed has also undergone a transformation. That's why I can cultivate so quickly." Hearing this, Zhuowen came to a realization. Although the Great Word Stone had always been between his brows, It had imperceptibly influenced him. At the same time that the primordial aura on the surface of the Great Word Stone changed him, it also changed the things around him. The Great World was especially affected, and Xiao He, who had been staying the Great World all this time, naturally gained a lot of benefits. Zhuowen climbed onto the Thunder Fire Sword with difficulty. The Blood Celestial Sword and the Death Sacrifice Sword were like the most loyal bodyguards protecting him. Rays of piercing sword light flashed, bursting with an extremely fierce aura. Dokyo held Daokong's hand and silently watched Zhuowen's back as he disappeared into the distance. A wooden smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he softly murmured, "Senior brother Daokong, thank you. Thank you for doing so much for the Hong sect. If we weren't sure before, we can be sure now. You will be the future of the Hong sect. You are the last hope of the Hong sect." As soon as he finished speaking, a blazing light surged on Dokyo and Daokong's bodies. If one looked closely, the blazing light was actually formed by densely packed and extremely small characters. As the light became more and more intense, Daokong and Dokyo's bodies became dimmer and dimmer, as if they would be blown away by the wind at any time. In the end, Daokong and Dokyo completely disappeared in the light. At the moment when the light reached its peak, it began to intertwine like lines, and finally revealed a golden ancient book. The ancient book broke through the air and chased after Zhuowen. Zhuowen, who was originally riding the wind on the Thunderfire Sword, suddenly sensed that something was amiss. He abruptly turned his head, only to see a golden flash charging towards him at an extremely frightening speed. In the blink of an eye, the golden light had completely caught up with him and blocked his path. F***CK, what the hell is this? Xiao He was forced to stop in midair, cursing and swearing. Zhuowen's gaze finally noticed the golden light blocking his path. A golden ancient book was suspended in the middle of the golden light, and on the surface of the book were the words, "Universal Scripture of Heaven and Earth." Zhuowen was stunned. The golden book was the universal scripture of heaven and earth, and the ancient book had taken the initiative to chase after him and block his path. What the hell was going on? Just as Zhuowen had a strange expression on his face, the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra obediently fell into his hands. The golden light flickered, illuminating Zhuowen's entire face. Chapter 3878. What's going on? Zhuowen was stunned. He felt as if he had just received a gift from the heavens. Senior brother Daowen, don't be surprised. This is the complete version of the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra. You have already gained our approval, so you are qualified to receive this ancient book. Without any warning, the golden book spoke in an immature voice. Zhuowen was no stranger to this voice. It was Dokyo's voice. "Junior brother Dokyo, is that you?" Zhuowen asked. "It's me. Senior brother Daowen, Daokong, and I are not humans. Our true forms are the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra." Dokyo's voice rang out again. Zhuowen's eyes widened. He could not believe it. After a long pause, he asked, "You are the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra? Didn't you say that the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra was destroyed? How could there be a complete version?" Dokyo spoke again. His voice was low and filled with sadness. "These are all part of the Hong sect's plan to cover up the existence of the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra. The Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra that was destroyed was actually a copy. However, it was made so real that even the elites of Hongwu and Shenzhen could not tell that it was a fake. The real Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra was taken away by the founder of the Hong sect. After that, he left for a faraway place. No one knows where he went. You should have guessed it by now. Our master is the founder of the Hong sect, Hong Shenwu. He is still alive. He is still alive because he wants to find the inheritors of the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra and the Hong sect." Zhuowen was stunned. He did not expect that Daokong and Dokyo's true forms were the original copies of the Heaven and Earth Howren Sutra. But now, after Dao Jing's reminder, He thought of the past with the two of them and believed it. The two little Taoist apprentices had followed Hong Shenwu for so long, but they had never grown up. That was a big problem. Back then, Zhuowen was puzzled as well. However, he did not ask the slovenly Taoist. Now, it seemed that he had found the answer. Senior Brother Daowen, I think you should have thought it through. We have been keeping an eye on you ever since you joined the Hong Triad. Even though the Hong Triad is in decline, it is not something that can be handed over to anyone. But your sincerity and loyalty have influenced us, and you have also gained the approval of our master. Therefore, Dao Kong and I have revealed our true forms and handed over the real heaven and earth Howren Sutra to you. Although the Hong sect is no more, we hope that you can live on. We don't ask you to make the Hong sect rise again, but we hope that the Hong sect will not disappear. Dokio's voice grew fainter and fainter. Finally, as the golden light dissipated, his voice stopped abruptly. The universal scripture of heaven and earth lay quietly in Zhuowen's palm. Zhuowen's gaze was complicated. He silently looked at the universal scripture of heaven and earth in his hand. In the end, he sighed deeply and kept it in his spirit ring. Little Black, I beg of you, please continue forward. Zhuowen looked straight ahead and said to Xiao He. Xiao He hesitated for a moment, but still followed Zhuowen's instructions. She turned into a stream of light and disappeared on the spot. Half a day later, Zhuowen rode on the Thunder Fire Sword and once again arrived at the mountain range where Shi Shanhong and Hong Shenwu had fought. This mountain range was almost completely razed to the ground. There were even many deep pits of different sizes in many places. From these terrifying terrains, it could be seen how terrifying the battle just now was. Zhuowen endured the pain in his divine soul and used his divine sense to carefully search every corner of this place. However, other than discovering the strong energy ripples in the surroundings, he found nothing. He did not discover Hong Shenwu, Shi Shanhong, or even Lord Gu of Hongwu Shengzhen, who had been summoned by Shi Shanhong from other places. Kid, there's no need to search anymore. The last person Shi Shanhong summoned was an expert in the fiend god transformation state. So what if the sloppy Taoist is strong? He would not be a match for that person in the end. However, you don't have to worry. Hongwu Shengzhen is so precious to the universal scripture of heaven and earth, and the sloppy Taoist has cultivated the universal scripture of heaven and earth. Before obtaining the complete universal scripture of heaven and earth, the sloppy Taoist's life should not be in danger. Xiao He tried to comfort him, but quickly realized that something was wrong. Zhuowen did not react at all. Xiao He flew out of the sword and landed on it. Only then did he realize that Zhuowen had unknowingly fainted. Sigh, this kid is too stubborn. Xiao He shook his head and controlled the Thunder Fire Sword to leave this place. Zhuowen felt like he had a very long dream. In the dream, he saw the sloppy Taoist, Dao Kong, and Dokio standing in front of him with strange smiles on their faces. He stood up in surprise and ran towards the three of them. He wanted to grab them tightly and keep calling their names. But time and time again, he missed. The three figures always stopped 5 meters in front of him, but he couldn't get close or touch them no matter how hard he tried. Zhuowen was so tired that he was panting. He stopped in his tracks and placed his hands on his knees, panting heavily. Then he saw 3 pairs of legs appear in front of him. He raised his head and realized that the 3 cultivators were standing in front of him with eerie grins on their faces. Their smiles were bright, but they were filled with a deep chill. They still did not speak and only looked coldly at Zhuowen. Their eyes were filled with an inexplicable meaning. Zhuowen could not help but take a few steps back. When he looked again, the 3 of them had disappeared before his eyes. Then he felt his legs being grabbed by someone. Then he saw the 3 of them sprawled on the ground. Their bodies were covered in blood, and their 6 hands were tightly grabbing onto Zhuowen's trousers. As they grabbed onto their trousers, they screamed miserably. Zhuowen opened his eyes abruptly. He touched his forehead and realized that it was covered in cold sweat. Kid, you're finally awake. You were screaming so loudly just now. Did you have a nightmare? Xiaohei hovered at the side and looked at Zhuowen, who had woken up. The worry in his eyes gradually disappeared as he spoke half-jokingly. Zhuowen fell silent. With a thought, a golden book appeared in his palm. On the cover of the book were the words Universal Sutra of Heaven and Earth. So it wasn't a dream. It's all real. Zhuowen blankly kept the Universal Sutra of Heaven and Earth as a bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Hong Xinwu, Dao Kong, and Dokyo were no longer here. Now, he was the only one left. Kid, this isn't your style. The current, you shouldn't be so dispirited. What you should be doing is increasing your strength as much as possible. Then, you should go to Hong Wu Divine Sect and destroy that old bastard Shi Shunhong's prestige. Also, that sect master of yours might not be dead. He might have been taken away to Hong Wu Shengzhen. Isn't Hong Wu Shengzhen's entrance trial about to begin? If you join Hong Wu Shengzhen, that would be equivalent to sneaking in. When the time comes, wouldn't it be convenient for you to find out more about Hong Xinwu? Xiaohei looked at Zhuowen with a serious gaze, and his voice became exceptionally solemn. Zhuowen's eyes gradually lit up. The previous dispiritedness was also dispelled. Xiaohei was right. He didn't have the time to be dispirited. The Hong sect's revenge and Hong Xinwu's whereabouts were still waiting for him. Chapter 3879. Kid, you fainted earlier. I found this in the ruins of the battlefield. Take it. Xiaohei waved her little paw, and an inconspicuous speck of dust fell into Zhuowen's hand. The remains of a greater world? Zhuowen's divine sense fell into the speck of dust and saw the devastated greater world contained within. The entire greater world had collapsed, and there was almost no place that was intact. It was like a weathered rock that was riddled with holes. The greater world is already like this. It's basically impossible to repair it, Zhuowen sighed. Just as he was about to throw away the speck of dust, a faint purple light suddenly burst out from between his eyebrows. Then, Zhuowen discovered in surprise that the greater world stone hidden deep within his eyebrows slowly floated out and entered the depths of the greater world with a whoosh. Then, Zhuowen discovered that the greater world stone's purple light became more and more intense. It was as if it had turned into an unprecedented purple sun in the greater world, illuminating the damaged greater world. What was even more bizarre was that Zhuowen sensed a vigorous vitality in this purple sun. Then, Zhuowen discovered that the damaged greater world was rapidly recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. Broken mountain ranges were uprooted from the ground. The collapsed earth was once again closed to form new land. Rainwater fell from the dried-up riverbed, forming a huge river that resembled a swimming dragon. Under the illumination of the purple sun, the devastated greater world gradually recovered its vitality and returned to its original state. When the basic topography of the greater world was restored, the greater world stone floating in the air fell to the ground with a whoosh. Zhuowen could clearly sense that the greater world stone seemed to have fused with the greater world, becoming the core of this greater world. Lush vegetation began to grow in the greater world. Vast grasslands and all kinds of living creatures appeared. In addition, Zhuowen discovered that the various laws of the greater world had been completely restored. They were even more advanced and powerful than before. At this moment, the greater world seemed to have undergone a metamorphosis. It was much more complete than the greater world before it was destroyed. It was on a completely different level. Back then, although the large world was covered in vegetation and the various rules were quite complete, it did not have the ability to give birth to living beings. But at this moment, the great world was like a real world. It could actually give birth to powerful creatures on its own. Its laws were more complete, and the world was more stable. Kid, look at your surprised face. What happened? Xiaohei asked in bewilderment when she saw Zhuowen grinning. Follow me into the great world, and you'll know, Zhuowen said with a smile. Then, he entered the great world with the 3 swords. After entering the great world, Xiaohei was just about to speak when she felt the terrifying energy surging from the great world. She immediately revealed a look of surprise. This great world, how can it have such rich energy? This is simply better than most of the cultivation holy lands in the 100 outer domains. Xiaohe was dumbfounded. He found it unbelievable. The supremacy stone has fused with the greater world, causing it to transform. Compared to the past, the current great world is no longer the same as before. Zhuowen's eyes were full of excitement. The rich energy surging in the great world was more surging than any place he had ever seen. It was definitely the best cultivation holy land he had ever seen. Moreover, Zhuowen found that as he stood in the great world and casually absorbed the energy, the injuries in his body actually showed signs of improvement. This discovery made Zhuowen very happy. Xiaohe, I need to go into seclusion to recuperate during this period. Remember to wake me up half a month before the entrance trial of Hongwu Shengzhen. Zhuowen gave a few instructions to Xiaohe. Then, he built a thatched hut in the great world. He took out a futon, sat cross-legged on it, and began to absorb the surging energy in the great world. The energy in the great world was not the usual chaotic energy. Instead, it was a kind of aura that was suffused with purple light. It was similar to the Hongmeng aura that Zhuowen had encountered previously, but it was much weaker than the Hongmeng aura. The level of this purple energy was much higher than the chaotic energy. As Zhuowen absorbed the purple energy, the injuries in his body rapidly healed. Moreover, his cultivation, which had been stagnant, showed signs of a breakthrough at this moment. Time passed minute by minute. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. During these 3 months, the transformation in the great world continued. Under the influence of the supremacy stone, the laws in the great world became more complete and the terrain became more vast. In particular, the purple energy flowing in the great world became denser. In these 3 months, with the help of the purple energy, Zhuowen's physical body and spiritual soul injuries had all recovered to their peak. His cultivation had even improved by 1 step. From the middle stage of the empty God transformation realm, he had jumped to the peak of the empty God transformation realm. At this moment, Xiaohe knocked on the door of Zhuowen's thatched hut. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. He slowly stood up, and the crisp sound of large and small pearls falling on a jade plate rang out from within his body. His eyes were deep and filled with a divine light, and an extremely terrifying power surged within his body. He was only half a step away from stepping into the heaven-crushing 5 changes, the 5 elements transformation realm. When that time came, his strength would undergo an earth-shattering transformation. Creak. Zhuowen opened the door to see Xiaohe floating in front of him. Kid, the entrance trial of Hongwu Shengzhen will begin in half a month. You should set off now, Xiaohe said in a low voice. Understand, Xiaohe. Thank you for your hard work this time. As Zhuowen spoke, he left the great world and flew toward the great music bar. The owner of the great music bar, Che Xiaorui, appeared in the hall. She had a slender male pet in her right arm, and her eyes, which were as big as a bull's, were fixed on the young man in the hall. Brother Daowen, you're really persistent. You're actually planning to participate in the entrance trial of Hongwu Shengzhen. Che Xiaorui put down the male pet in her arms and strode into the hall. She sat down on the main seat in the hall. Zhuowen cupped his fist to Che Xiaorui and said with a smile, There's no reason for me to go back on my decision. I'm definitely going to participate in the entrance trial of Hongwu Shengzhen this time. So, I'll have to trouble you this time. Che Xiaorui waved her hand and said nonchalantly, It's a small matter. After all, I'm the one who gave you this trial token. If you want to participate in the entrance trial of Hongwu Shengzhen, you'll need someone from the Great Music Bar to guide you. As she spoke, Che Xiaorui took out her communication jade and sent a message. After a while, a middle-aged man with white hair walked into the hall. Chapter 3880. Xiao Dao. Hongwu Shengzhen's entrance trial is in half a month. Take Brother Daowen to Hongwu Shengzhen. Che Xiaorui said in a low voice. Lu Xiaodao cupped his hands respectfully and said, "Don't worry, workshop owner. I'll definitely bring Brother Daowen to Hongwu Shengzhen safely." Che Xiaorui nodded and then smiled at Zhuowen. "Brother Daowen, Xiaodao will take care of your matters." "Thank you, workshop owner." Zhuowen cupped his hands and thanked her. Lu Xiaodao then arranged for Zhuowen to stay at the Great Music Workshop for the night. The next day, he took Zhuowen away from the Great Music Workshop. Hongwu Shengzhen was in the territory of Liyuan Main Region. It was extremely far from Zhongzhou. Even a God Realm transformation powerhouse might not be able to reach the border of Liyuan Main Region, even if he used his movement technique at full speed and ran day and night for 3 years. However, there was a direct teleportation array between Zhongzhou and Hongwu Sage Continent, one of the 4 continents of Liyuan Main Region. Using this teleportation array, it only took 1 hour to reach Hongwu Sage Continent. Hongwu Sage Continent was naturally the continent where Hongwu Shengzhen was located. As for the other 3 continents of Liyuan Main Region, they corresponded to the names of the other 4 Shengzhen. In addition to the 4 continents, Liyuan Main Region had other large areas. Those areas were occupied by the other super forces of Liyuan Main Region. However, they were the most famous in the 4 Shengzhen. Therefore, most cultivators' knowledge of Liyuan Main Region stopped at the 4 continents. This is Zhongzhou Divine Palace. It was built by most of the forces in Zhongzhou. In this Divine Palace, there is a giant teleportation array that can connect to Liyuan Main Region. In order to build such a giant teleportation array, Zhongzhou spent a huge amount of money and manpower. It took thousands of years to successfully build it. Lu Xiaodao pointed at the huge divine palace in front of him and introduced its origin to Zhuowen. His eyes were filled with awe. Zhuowen looked at the temple in front of him with amazement in his eyes. The divine palace in front of him occupied a vast area and was made up of white jade. The divine palace's appearance was majestic and magnificent, even more majestic than most of the sects of the super forces in the central province. Zhuowen found it hard to imagine that such a huge and magnificent temple was built just to carry a teleportation array. Just how complicated and huge was this teleportation array? "Brother Daowen, follow me into the temple." Lu Xiaodao smiled as he led Zhuowen into the temple. There were many cultivators in the Central Continent Divine Palace. They came and went in an endless stream. Zhuowen could see that most of the people who came in and out of the Central Continent Divine Temple were merchants who came to do business in the Central Continent and the Liyuan Main Region. Through the difference between the 2 regions, they earned a lot of profits by buying and selling at a profit. After entering the Central State Divine Palace, there was an inner hall. The surface of the inner hall was surging with dazzling array Dao ripples. He could see that there were many terrifying array formations and restrictions in the surroundings. Moreover, these array formations and restrictions were far beyond his level because he could only barely understand a small part of them. On both sides of the inner hall's entrance, there were 2 old men sitting cross-legged. Although their eyes were closed, the aura emitted from their bodies was extremely powerful. Zhuowen's eyes turned cold. These 2 old men were both at the early stage of the God Domain transformation realm. They were powerhouses at the same level as Sikong Chiyu. Just the inner hall gatekeepers were such powerhouses. It could be seen how much importance the central province forces attach to this temple. "Where do you 2 plan to go?" When Zhuowen and Lu Xiaodao arrived at the entrance of the inner hall, the old man in green on the left slowly opened his eyes and looked at the 2 indifferently. He asked calmly, "We plan to go to the Hong Martial Saint Continent." Lu Xiaodao said respectfully, 50,000 chaos crystals per person. The old man in green said indifferently. Lu Xiaodao took out a spirit ring and handed it to the old man in green. The old man in green casually scanned it and discovered that there were indeed 100,000 chaos crystals inside. He put it away casually and nodded at the 2, indicating for them to enter. Entering the inner hall, Zhuowen discovered that the space inside the inner hall was extremely vast. In the centermost ground of the inner hall, there was an extremely complicated array pattern. This array pattern was circular. The area was so large that it practically occupied 2/3 of the entire inner hall. At this moment, this array pattern emitted a faint dim light. Looking carefully, there were fine runes floating inside the dim light. The instant Zhuan looked at this array pattern, his face changed slightly, revealing a solemn look. If it was said that he could only understand a small part of the array outside the inner hall, then this teleportation array pattern inside the inner hall, he was practically clueless. It was seriously too profound. Zhuan sighed in his heart. No wonder this teleportation array needed several thousand years to build. Such a complicated array pattern was indeed not something that could be set up overnight. Unless it was a top-notch array, Dao Divine Master. But Central State clearly did not have this level of array, Dao Divine Master. Brother Daowin, let's just enter this array pattern. This teleportation array will automatically activate and send us to Hong Marshall's Saint Continent. As Lu Xiaodao spoke, he led Zhuan into the complicated array pattern. Sure enough, after a while, the surrounding array pattern emitted a blazing white light. Then, the complicated array pattern beneath their feet suddenly lit up. Countless complicated runes separated from the array pattern and floated in the air. These runes combined together and formed a huge flood dragon that swam in the air. After circling once, it swooped down vertically and sank into Zhuan and Lu Xiaodao's bodies. Zhuan only felt countless runes flash before his eyes. Then, the runes blurred and turned into a blazing white light. Finally, his vision turned black. His body seemed to be floating, and there was no gravity around him. However, he could strangely sense that his body was moving quickly. The speed was so fast that even if he used all his strength, he could not control his body. This feeling of losing control was very similar to a small teleportation array, but it was more intense and lasted for a longer time. About an hour later, Zhuan discovered that the feeling of losing control of his body gradually dissipated, and the darkness in front of his eyes also slowly disappeared. Then his feet landed on solid ground, and he stood firmly on a certain piece of hard ground. When he opened his eyes, he finally saw the scene in front of him. What appeared in front of him was the interior of a large hall. The area was not large and was slightly smaller than the inner hall of the Central State Main Hall. Outside the teleportation array stood a young woman. She looked coldly at Zhuan and Lu Xiaodao, who were inside the teleportation array, and said, "Where did you come from? Why did you come to Hong Marshall's Saint Continent?" Zhuan was startled. What was going on? Why was he being questioned the moment he arrived at Hong Marshall's Saint Continent? Lu Xiaodao clearly understood the rules here and quickly said with a smile, "We came from the Central State of Wukong State. We came here to bring the juniors to participate in Hong Marshall Shenzhen's entrance trial." Chapter 3881. The young woman led Zhuan and Lu Xiaodao out of the main hall and into a hall in the side hall. There were a total of 7 groups of people chatting in the main hall of the side hall. When they noticed the arrival of the young woman, their voices quieted down. They looked curiously at Zhuan and Lu Xiaodao, who had just entered. This is the gathering place for the cultivators who are participating in the entrance trial of the Wukong State region. Since you're also from the Wukong State region, please wait here. The divine ship of the Hong Marshall Sacred Sect will arrive soon. I will inform you then. The young woman glanced at Zhuan and Lu Xiaodao before leaving the hall. Could this fellow be vice owner Lu of the great music mill in the Central State? In the hall, a tall and thin middle-aged man in a green robe looked at Lu Xiaodao with surprise in his eyes. "You are Perfected Zhang from the Central State Primordial Fire Tower?" Lu Xiaodao was familiar with the green-robed man and recognized the middle-aged man's true identity at a glance. Lu Xiaodao and Perfected Zhang immediately chatted for a while. Perfected Zhang then looked at Zhuan, who was beside Lu Xiaodao, and said with a smile, "I didn't expect that the great music mill would send a disciple to participate in Hongwu Shengzhen's entry trial." I remember that the owner of the great music mill said that she didn't intend to use the quota in her hands. Lu Xiaodao laughed dryly and said, "Perfected Zhang, you misunderstand. The great music mill indeed doesn't intend to participate in Hongwu Shengzhen's entry trial. This person isn't a disciple of the great music mill." Lu Xiaodao gave a brief introduction, explaining the process of Zhua when obtaining the quota token. Perfected Zhang then realized that the young man brought by Lu Xiaodao was indeed not a disciple of the great music mill, but a rogue cultivator. However, Perfected Zhang shook his head inwardly. He could see at a glance that Zhuowen's cultivation was only at the void god transformation stage. With such a cultivation, there was no way he could compete in this entry trial. The two disciples that the Primordial Fire Tower had brought were the two most outstanding geniuses in the Primordial Fire Tower. Their cultivation had already reached the 5 elements transformation stage. It wasn't just the Primordial Fire Pagoda. The juniors from the other factions present were all at least at the 5 elements transformation stage. Zhuowen curiously sized up the disciples brought by the 7 groups of people in the hall. Among them, the most eye-catching ones should be the 2 disciples brought by the True Fire Tower. The 2 disciples were a man and a woman. The man was handsome, while the woman was beautiful. The reason Zhuowen paid attention to this couple was mainly because they were the strongest among the juniors brought by the 7 groups of people. From their auras, Zhuowen could tell that the man was at the peak of the 5 elements transformation stage, while the woman was at the late stage. From Taoist Zhang's words, Zhuowen learned the names of the couple. The man's name was Li Miao, and the woman's name was Lu Hong. This young man and woman were the most outstanding disciples of True Fire Pagoda. Other than the True Fire Tower, Zhuowen discovered that although the other 6 groups of people were all rather powerful forces in the Central Continent, they were at most on the same level as the True Fire Tower, or even worse. As for the disciples they sent, they were slightly weaker than Li Miao and Lu Hong. The people from the Hong Martial Divine Sect aren't here yet. Lu Xiaodao looked around the hall and couldn't find anyone from the Hong Martial Divine Sect, so he couldn't help but ask curiously. The Hong Martial Divine Sect could be considered a branch of the strongest Hong Martial Shengzhen in the Wukong region. This time, it was Hong Martial Shengzhen's entrance training, so the Hong Martial Divine Sect would definitely send their disciples to participate. They shouldn't be here yet. Taoist Zhang's eyes flickered as he suddenly whispered, "Do you guys know what happened in the Hong Martial Divine Sect a while ago?" The leaders in the hall all revealed excited expressions. "Of course we know. I remember that not long ago, there was a terrifying energy explosion in the Hong Martial Divine Sect. It was said that a portion of the buildings in the sect were destroyed. Other than that, many of the upper echelons of the Hong Martial Divine Sect were said to have fallen in that battle. It could be said that they suffered heavy losses." In the hall, everyone was discussing animatedly. They were obviously interested in the battle that happened in the Hong Martial Divine Sect. Even the arrogant True Fire Pagoda's disciples, Li Miao and Lu Hong, were listening attentively with admiration on their faces. They were obviously convinced by the person who caused the chaos in the Hong Martial Divine Sect. Zhuowen listened to everyone's discussion silently with a calm gaze. If these people knew that the person who caused the chaos in the Hong Martial Divine Sect was this harmless-looking young man, who knew what they would think? Who is it? Who has the guts and strength to cause trouble in the Hong Martial Divine Sect? In the hall, a middle-aged man asked curiously. Taoist Zhang hesitated for a while before saying, "I heard that it was a remnant of the Hong sect." Later on, the Hong Martial Divine Sect's sect master, Shi Shenhong, and great elder Sikong Chiyu personally chased after the remnant. In the end, the sect master returned with heavy injuries while great elder Sikong Chiyu was said to have died outside. Everyone was shocked. They were very clear about Shi Shenhong's strength. He was a mid-stage god domain transformation expert. As for the Hong Martial Divine Sect's great elder, Sikong Chiyu, although not as strong as Shi Shenhong, she was still an early-stage god domain transformation expert. When these two experts went to chase after the remnant of the Hong sect, one died and the other was injured. This was too frightening. Hearing up to here, Zhuowen sighed in his heart. He knew that Sikong Chiyu was killed by Shi Shanhong in the end and couldn't escape. Didn't they say that the Hong sect had declined long ago? How can they still have such a terrifying expert? Someone asked in confusion. It said that the one who took action was Hong Shenwu. He's the founder of the Hong sect. Fortunately, Shi Shanhong summoned the Hong martial Shengzhen's experts and took down Hong Shenwu. Daoist Zhang said in a low voice. Everyone was relieved. So was the founder of the Hong sect, Hong Shenwu. No wonder he could cause such a ruckus in the Hong martial divine sect. Even Shi Shanhong and Sikong Chiyu weren't his match. They were the upper echelons of the Central State's major powers. They knew a little about the Hong sect's past. They knew that Hong Shenwu was originally a genius of the Hong martial Shengzhen. He left the Hong martial Shengzhen and came to the Central State to establish the Hong sect. However, for some unknown reason, he angered the Hong martial Shengzhen and was annihilated by the experts sent by the Hong martial Shengzhen. They all thought that Hong Shenwu had died long ago. They didn't expect him to live until now and cause such a ruckus in the Hong martial divine sect. Zhuowen clenched his fists, the flames of anger burning in his heart. He remembered Hong Shenwu's instructions to him. Other than anger, there was more bitterness in his heart. Hong Shenwu's instructions to him were simple. It was to not let the Hong sect's inheritance be severed and to take good care of Dao Kong and Do Kio. But he messed it all up. Even Do Kio and Dao Kong sacrificed themselves to become the original copy of the heaven and earth Howard scripture. Chapter 3882. Everyone seems to be very concerned about my Hong Wu divine sect. Just as everyone was discussing fervently, a rather unhappy voice came from outside the hall. In an instant, the voices in the hall stopped abruptly. Everyone who was originally discussing couldn't help but cast their gazes towards the entrance of the hall. At the entrance of the hall stood two figures. One was old and the other was young. The old man's hair and beard were all white. He was dressed in black and held a bronze walking stick in his hand. The carvings on the surface of the bronze walking stick were very exquisite, especially the handle. It was a dragon's head that opened its mouth and spat out beads. It looked very lifelike. At this moment, the old man was coldly looking at everyone in the hall. Obviously, the one who spoke was this old man. So, it's Elder Wulong of the Hong Wu divine sect. We were just speaking nonsense just now. Elder Wulong, please don't take it to heart. Seeing that the atmosphere in the hall had become slightly awkward, Daoist Zhang hurriedly came out to smooth things over. In front of this old man, his attitude was rather humble. He also knew that it was their fault for speaking nonsense behind their backs. Therefore, Daoist Zhang naturally wouldn't talk back to Elder Wulong and worsen the situation. In the hall, the other cultivators who led the group also cupped their hands and apologized to Elder Wulong. The Hong Wu divine sect's influence in the central region was huge and could be ranked in the top 3. They didn't want to offend Elder Wulong because of a few words. Seeing that Daoist Zhang and the rest had apologized, Elder Wulong's expression eased a little. He then led the young man behind him into the hall. Zhuowen glanced at Elder Wulong indifferently. Back when he was in the Hong Wu divine sect, he didn't see this old man. At that time, this old man probably wasn't in the Hong Wu divine sect. Otherwise, he would have died under the attack of his 3 fire true mirror. Zhuowen had also changed his appearance when he participated in the Hong Wu Shengzhen's entrance trial. Even if Elder Wulong had seen his portrait, he wouldn't be able to recognize that he was Zhuowen, who was wanted by the Hong Wu divine sect. Zhuowen also noticed the young man behind Elder Wulong. It had to be said that this young man was very handsome with fair skin. If he wasn't wearing men's clothes, people would mistake him for a woman. The young man lifted his chin slightly, his eyes filled with pride. After he entered the hall, he didn't even look at the other juniors. Li Miao, Lu Hong, and the other juniors didn't show any displeasure because of this person's arrogance. Their gazes towards the young man were filled with reverence. Early yin-yang transformation. He does have the right to be arrogant. Zhuowen immediately identified the young man's cultivation base. He was much more powerful than the other juniors in Hall, and he had already reached the early stage of the yin-yang transformation. This level of cultivation was comparable to the elders of the major forces. Moreover, this person was still young. His future was limitless. However, I will beat him to death in the trial. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. Now, he no longer had any good impression of the Hong martial god sect. If he were to meet this fella during the trial, he would definitely beat him to death. You must be Kashinjue. Back then, you were a genius second only to Luo Lingyu. Now, you have also reached the early stage of the yin-yang transformation. Looks like your Hong martial god sect came with absolute confidence. Lu Xiaodao looked at the young man and couldn't help but praise him. Ku Xinjue frowned slightly and said unhappily, Luo Lingyu is a traitor of our Hong martial god sect. Vice Master Lu, please don't mention this person in front of us. Also, even if Luo Lingyu is still a member of the Hong martial god sect, the title of the number one genius of the Hong martial god sect will not belong to her. It will belong to me. Lu Xiaodao was a little embarrassed, but he didn't refute. The difference between the Great Music Bar and the Hong martial god sect was too great. He couldn't refute Ku Xinjue and offend the Hong martial god sect. Moreover, he had indeed said the wrong thing. Luo Lingyu was already a traitor of the Hong martial god sect. If he brought up the past, wouldn't he be embarrassing her? If Luo Lingyu was still in the Hong martial god sect, you wouldn't be the number one genius. Her cultivation and talent are both above yours. Suddenly, an indifferent voice rang out in the hall, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Everyone's gaze involuntarily fell on the young man, standing beside Lu Xiaodao. No one expected that this young man would actually refute Ku Xinjue. Moreover, there was a trace of disdain in his tone towards Ku Xinjue. Ku Xinjue's pupils shrank as he turned his head to look at Zhuowen. His sharp gaze was filled with a chilling intent. In the depths of this chilling intent, there was also a knife-like killing intent. Who do you think you are? How dare you refute me? Ku Xinjue suppressed his anger and said coldly. Elder Wulong also stopped exchanging pleasantries with the others and looked toward Zhuowen. When he saw that Zhuowen was standing beside Lu Xiaodao, he said in a deep voice, Vice Master Lu, are all the disciples of the Great Music Bar so unruly? Lu Xiaodao laughed dryly, feeling bitter and helpless in his heart. He quickly signaled Zhuowen with his eyes and apologized to Elder Wulong. His name is Daowen. He isn't a disciple of the Great Music Bar. He obtained our entry token, and I only guided him to participate in the Hong Marshal Shengzhen's entrance trial. What he said just now was unintentional. I hope Elder Wulong won't take it to heart. Zhuowen was expressionless. He glanced at Ku Xinjue indifferently and didn't say anything else. If Lu Xiaodao wasn't here, he would have continued speaking. He didn't want to put Lu Xiaodao in a difficult position. Ku Xinjue's anger rose. He saw disdain, indifference, and ridicule in Zhuowen's eyes. Who does this mere rogue cultivator think he is? How dare he look at me with such a gaze? However, Ku Xinjue was quite scheming and didn't turn hostile on the spot. He coldly looked at Zhuowen and thought to himself, when the entrance trial begins, I'll definitely teach this bastard a lesson. When the time comes, I'll make this bastard beg for death. Li Miao and Lu Hong looked at Zhuowen mockingly and shook their heads inwardly. They felt that this rogue cultivator was really stupid. He actually offended Ku Xinjue in public. In this entry trial, this rogue cultivator was probably going to have a hard time. However, this thought only flashed through their minds, and they did not take it to heart. After all, Zhuowen's aura was only at the pinnacle of the void god transformation stage. The difference between them and him was too great. From their point of view, whether or not this kid could survive the entrance trial was still a question. How could they possibly place too much attention on this kid? This is just a small matter. I naturally won't take it to heart. Elder Wulong looked at Zhuowen meaningfully and wave his hand at Lu Xiaodao. Zhuowen silently stood by the side and sneered in his heart. Although Elder Wulong's gaze was calm, he could feel the killing intent in his eyes. The Hongwu divine sect was really a bunch of narrow-minded people. He only retorted a sentence, and they actually had the intent to kill. Everyone, let's follow the old rules this time. There are hundreds of provinces participating in the Hongwu Shengzhen's entrance trial, and there are close to 10,000 sects. Chapter 3883. Elder Wulong is right. It's not only the forces from Wukong State that are participating in the entrance trial of Hongwu Shengzhen. There are forces from other states as well. The competition is the fiercest in the early stage of the trial. It's best for the cultivators from Wukong State to team up and get through the early stage. Perfected Zhang agreed with Elder Wulong's suggestion. The rest of the Perfected Zhang people in the hall agreed and did not raise any objections. Based on the current situation, it was indeed a good idea to team up in the early stage of the entrance trial. As for the later stage, they would have to fight on their own. Elder, I think it's not a problem to team up. However, not everyone can join our alliance. We won't accept those who are too weak, Xinjue suddenly said. At the same time, he could not help but glance at Zhuowen, who was not far away. Elder Wulong naturally understood Xinjue's intention and said, Nephew Ku is right. If you're too weak, you'll lower the overall standard of the team and become a burden to the team. How about this? The members of the alliance in the early stage of the entrance trial must be at least of the 5-element transformation stage. Otherwise, they won't be qualified to join the alliance. After Elder Wulong finished speaking, everyone in the hall could not help but look at Zhuowen. In the hall, only Zhuowen's cultivation was below the 5-element transformation stage. He was only at the peak of the Void God transformation stage. Elder Wulong and Xinjue's words were obviously directed at Zhuowen. Lu Xiaodao's face was filled with embarrassment, but he did not dare to say anything. He was only a small fry in front of Elder Wulong and Perfected Zhang. He had no right to speak. Moreover, Zhuowen was not a disciple of the Great Music Bar. He had only obtained the entry token of the Great Music Bar to participate in the entrance trial of Hongwu Shengzhen. He was only a guide. Therefore, Lu Xiaodao could not offend Elder Wulong and the rest because of Zhuowen. Zhuowen secretly shook his head. Even if these people did not ostracize him, Zhuowen did not plan to join their alliance. In the following period of time, the young woman led a few more groups of people into the hall. Without exception, they were all cultivators from the Wukong State region. However, these groups of cultivators were not from the central continent, and their auras were far inferior to Elder Wulong and Taoist Zhang. As for the juniors they brought with them, their cultivation bases were relatively weak. The strongest among them was only at the late Void God transformation stage, and the weakest were not even at the Void God transformation stage. Elder Wulong and the others merely glanced at the cultivators who came later and ignored them. Clearly, they did not think much of them. These cultivators who came later could also see that Elder Wulong and the others were not ordinary. In addition, the latter did not pay any attention to them, so they did not take the initiative to talk to them. Instead, they stood quietly at the side. Hello, senior brother. I'm Ling from the Twilight Sect. May I know where senior brother is from? Among the cultivators who came later, a sweet-looking young woman saw Zhuowen standing alone at the side and curiously came over to strike up a conversation. I'm Dao One. I'm just a rogue cultivator. Zhuowen smiled. Zhuowen had heard of the Twilight Sect. It was the most powerful sect in a region called the Liang State region near the central continent. It was much more powerful than the Ascension sect of the G-State region. However, there was still a gap between the Twilight sect and the major forces in the central continent. The woman named Ling had a good cultivation base. She was about the same as Zhuowen. She was also at the peak of the Void God transformation stage. Among the few groups of cultivators who came later, her cultivation base was the highest. When she heard that Zhuowen was a rogue cultivator, Ziling's beautiful eyes revealed a trace of surprise. She looked at Lu Xiaodao, who was beside Zhuowen, and hesitated. Obviously, she recognized Lu Xiaodao's identity. I accidentally completed a task issued by the Great Music Bar and received a place token from the Great Music Bar, Zhuowen explained calmly. Ziling revealed a look of understanding. Han Wushengzhen had issued many place tokens to many forces in the central continent. However, many forces did not intend to use the place tokens. Some forces would give the place tokens away or even auction them off. Therefore, Ziling was not surprised that Zhuowen was participating in Han Wushengzhen's trial as a rogue cultivator. So it's you, Brother Daowen. Although you are a rogue cultivator, your strength is not ordinary. This trial will not be easy, and it is very likely that you will be in danger. Why don't you and I work together? Ziling looked hopefully at Zhuowen. Ziling had a good eye. She had already noticed that Zhuowen's cultivation base was the same as hers. They were both at the peak of the Void God transformation stage. If she joined forces with Zhuowen, she would be more confident in this trial. Zhuowen grinned and pointed at Elder Wulong's group, saying, Junior Sister Ziling, you may think that my strength is not bad, but those people over there don't think so. They are also cultivators from the Wukong State region. They have already formed an alliance. However, they will not accept anyone whose cultivation base is lower than the 5 elements transformation stage. Now, do you still think I'm strong? Ziling glanced at Elder Wulong and shook her head. I know that they are all disciples of the big forces in Zhongzhou. Naturally, they look down on small forces like us. So, after I entered the hall, I didn't try to get close to them, but with more strength, more hope. If we can work together, our chances of passing the trial will increase by a lot. Ziling was very self-aware. She knew that with her status, she would not be able to blend in with Kashinjiwe and the others. So, she spoke her thoughts very frankly. Zhuowen glanced at Ziling, his eyes full of admiration. Ziling had a temperament that was neither servile nor overbearing, which Zhuowen appreciated. If Sister Ziling doesn't mind, then I'll work with you. Zhuowen smiled and did not refuse Ziling's kindness. Ziling smiled sweetly, and then pulled Zhuowen to meet her master. Ziling's master was a gentle and beautiful middle-aged woman. She was an elder with a high status in the Dawnfall sect. Her cultivation base was around the early stage of the yin-yang change. When Ziling and Zhuowen were talking, she had already been observing Zhuowen. Now that Ziling had told her about working with Zhuowen, she naturally had no objections. After all, it was a good thing for Ziling to have a helper whose cultivation base was not inferior to Ziling's. In the next few groups of cultivators, 3 young disciples took the initiative to talk to Ziling and Zhuowen. They all said that they wanted to work with them in the trial. The 3 of them were very nervous because their cultivation bases were a little weak. The strongest one was only at the early stage of the Nihility transformation stage, and the other 2 were only at the pinnacle of the Ascension change stage. With this kind of strength, they were basically cannon fodder for Han Wushengzhen's entrance trial. At first, Ziling was a little hesitant. After all, the strength of these 3 people was a little weak. Following them would only be a burden. Chapter 3884. Hee. Birds of a feather really do flock together. This Daowen really thinks he's some big shot. How dare he try to form a clique there? Ku Xinjue looked coldly at the corner of the hall, where Zhuowen, Ziling, and the others were making their moves. His lips curled into a disdainful smile as he muttered to himself. Li Miao and Lu Hong stood beside Ku Xinjue. Both of them knew that Ku Xinjue was extraordinary, so they were trying to build a good relationship with him. It's just a bunch of mobs. No matter how many people he has, they're just a bunch of cannon fodder. Lu Hong covered her mouth and smiled coquettishly as she looked at Ku Xinjue. She leaned very close to Ku Xinjue, almost throwing her whole body into his embrace. Although Li Miao was a little unhappy with Lu Hong's initiative, he could not show it in front of Ku Xinjue, so he just pretended not to see it. Brother Ku, this guy doesn't know what's good for him. He was rude to you just now. When the entrance trial begins, I'll take care of him for you. Li Miao whispered to Ku Xinjue try to please him. He Shinjue shook his head and said, "He's just a clown. There's no need for us to do anything. This guy won't even last a day in the trial." In the hall, the cultivators from Zhongzhou and those from outside were divided into two groups, chatting softly. Only Lu Xiaodao was in an awkward position. The great music bar behind him was a force of the Central State, but Zhuan had a close relationship with a disciple who wasn't from the Central State. Therefore, he simply stood aside and didn't say a word. About half an hour later, the young woman who had led them in at the beginning appeared in the hall again. "Everyone, please come with me. The Sea King is about to set sail. You can take the Sea King to the headquarters of Hongwu Shengzhen." After the young woman said this coldly, she left the hall without looking back. Everyone quickly followed her. "Dawen, I'll send you off here. The rest is up to you." Lu Xiaodao did not follow but said calmly to Zhuowen, "Deputy Master Lu, thank you so much for this journey. I'll walk the rest of the way." Zhuowen bowed deeply to Lu Xiaodao, then followed Zi Ling and the others out of the hall. Lu Xiaodao silently looked at Zhuowen's departing figure with a complicated expression. He knew that after this farewell, Zhuowen would not have the chance to return to the Central State. He knew how terrifying Hongwu Shengzhen's entrance trial was. Even 5-element transformation stage geniuses had a high risk of dying there, let alone void God transformation stage geniuses. The young woman silently led the way in front, and they walked past numerous pavilions and corridors as if they were looking at flowers while riding on horseback. As for Zhuowen, the more he walked, the more surprised he was. Just how big was this palace? It was as if there was no end to it. An hour later, the young woman finally brought them to the entrance of the palace. Zhuowen walked out of the door and turned around to look at the magnificent door behind him. He couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. What appeared in front of him was indeed a palace, and it was as big as a city. The entrance of the palace behind him alone was more magnificent than the gates of many cities. The surface of the palace was dazzling with jewels, and it was inlaid with a dense array of strange gems. Observing a leaf to know the spring and autumn, and observing a drop of water to know the sea. From this door, it could be seen how grand and majestic the palace he was in was. In front of the door sat a giant ship that was at least 1,000 feet long. This ship was much larger than the average divine ship, and it was comparable to dozens of divine ships combined. The body of the giant ship was forged from some kind of dark blue, or its surface emitted a faint blue light and a vast aura that spread out invisibly. If one were to blindfold their eyes, just by feeling this aura, one would think that it was not a giant ship, but a terrifying ancient beast. This is the Sea King, one of the top saint ships in the Hongwu Sage continent. This ship is covered with 8th grade formations. Even if a fiend god transformation expert comes, they won't be able to break through this ship in a short time. The young woman introduced the ship to everyone. However, no one could hear her as they stared blankly at the ship in front of them. This was the first time they had seen such a majestic ship. This was a saint ship that was much more powerful than the average divine ship. This saint ship belongs to the Hongwu Shengzhen. Elder Wulong was also shocked. He couldn't help but ask, "Yes, this is the only saint ship that belongs to the Hongwu Shengzhen. This time, we are here to bring you to the Hongwu Shengzhen." The young woman nodded. At this moment, a rainbow light flashed across the deck of the ship. The 7-colored light streaked across the sky and transformed into a 7-color divine bridge that extended all the way to the front of everyone. "You can all go up," the young woman said. Elder Wulong and the others nodded and stepped onto the bridge. Zhuowen, Ziling, and the others stepped into the 7-colored brilliance, and then the 7-color divine bridge flowed upward on its own, carrying them and landing steadily on the deck. "Are you all cultivators from the Wukong State region?" On the deck, an old man with golden teeth walked up to them and asked expressionlessly. "We are from the Wukong State region," Elder Wulong said politely. "The rooms of the Wukong State region have been arranged to be on the 4th floor. This is your room number. Go back to your rooms. This place is quite far from the Hongwu Shengzhen. It will take the Sea King a day to get there." The old man waved his hand, and rays of light shot out and landed in everyone's palms. Zhuowen took a closer look and saw that a jade tablet had appeared in his palm. On it were the words, "Fourth floor, number 10. It must be the room number that he would be staying in. Senior brother Daowen, I am number 9. I will be staying next to you." Ziling held the jade tablet in her hand and waved it in front of Zhuowen with a smile. "Remember, do not leave your room at night. The Liyuan main region is not like the Wukong state region. The night here is much scarier. If anyone leaves their room without permission and something happens to them, don't blame me for not warning you." After the old man solemnly reminded them, he waved his hand impatiently, indicating that they could go back to their rooms. Zhuowen revealed a pondering expression. The old man's last sentence was somewhat thought-provoking. The night in the Liyuan main region was much scarier than the night in the Wukong state region. Did this mean that the evil spirits that appeared in the night here were much stronger than in the Wukong state region? Zhuowen looked at the old man who had left. He wanted to ask about the details of the night, but although the old man walked very slowly, he disappeared in the blink of an eye. He did not know where he had gone. Zhuowen's eyes were solemn. He knew that this ordinary-looking old man was definitely a top master. In addition, Zhuowen also noticed that the auras of the sailors who were yelling and working on the deck were extremely vast. They were like blazing suns that were difficult to look at directly. It looked like a leaking balloon. Zhuowen could vaguely hear a frenzied roar coming from the depths of the darkness. Then, the pitch-black hand quickly retreated back into the darkness. Zhuowen's gaze turned extremely serious. The giant hand that had come from the depths of the darkness was extremely terrifying. It was stronger than any evil spirit he had encountered so far. Whether it was Salado or Prado, they were far from being a match for the owner of this giant black hand. Zhuowen knew that the owner of this giant black hand was at least a warrior realm evil spirit, or even stronger. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.